Three people just showed up. We've got everyone. So let's go ahead and get started. The time is 6:02. And why don't we start with a roll call attendance? We'll start with you, upper left-hand corner there, Ralph Dormitzer.
Ralph Dormitzer present.
Susan Franklin.
Susan Franklin here.
Corey Evans.
Corey Evans here.
Mike Dick.
Mike Dick here.
Francine Lyons.
Francine Lyons here.
And Brian Host here. All right, so we are underway. We've also got Michelle. Guessing we may be joined by others later. But why don't we go ahead and get started as best we can.
Before we begin, I have a comment I'd like to bring to the group and to you.
Please proceed.
I can only give us till 8:30 p.m. I think that's sufficient time. We get done what we can get done, I hope, by then. I would just recommend that you, Brian, keep us on track, myself included, keep our questions to the point and get our simple answers so that we have time for discussion.
I appreciate that. I think we all feel the pain of going over time. And I will do my best and certainly will take input along the way if we start to stray. So thank you for that, Michael. Now, let me just also ask before we get going, Michelle, the agenda has a handful of items on it. And I am just looking at the capital spreadsheet, and I know we've got a bunch of things that are highlighted green, but in a number of cases, I don't think we've actually voted them. I think we're just comfortable that they're not controversial at this point.
Correct. Yep, the things that are highlighted in green, you didn't have any additional questions on, so you were prepared to vote. The reason we didn't vote last week is you were missing members and you wanted full membership. Also, I did add enterprise funds on there because the new quote came in for the vehicle, and it's a little higher than the $85,000 that originally was voted, so they're asking you to re-vote based on the new amount.
Okay. So just a procedural issue. I'm looking at the agenda and there's not sort of a catch-all vote all items on this list. And which creates a problem to vote items that are not listed specifically. I should have caught that, but I did not.
How about items not reasonably known within 48 hours? I mean, can you use that as a basis possibly, Brian?
I feel like we have most of it covered. We have facilities, library, town hall, DPW, enterprise funds, parking enforcement, school capital. I think that covers almost everything.
It probably does. Why don't we handle it that way, Michelle? And if we find after going through this list that there are items that don't fall into any of these buckets that still need voted, maybe what we do is we take an indicative vote subject to a confirmatory vote at a subsequent meeting with the item listed on the agenda. Our votes aren't going to change.
Looks like the only thing we don't have is Parker Ave.
Okay.
Everything else is included.
And Parker Ave is a no vote.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't think there's any controversy on that. We can certainly pass along to the other committees that need to vote this where we're going to be on that. And then we can actually deliver our vote prior to, in our next meeting prior to the warrant going to print. But in terms of, us signaling the other committees, which is really the point of us voting items today, I think we can give that guidance quite comfortably. So why don't we go
you're referring to something that I'm unfamiliar with. What is Parker Avenue? Are you talking about the dock?
No, Parker Avenue is the CSCR facility, Michael. And
what line item are you looking at?
They've got two requests in here on Parker Avenue. One is for the HVAC system and one is for the roof.
And on this list, where is that?
It's
2 and 3 and 4
second and third items.
Thank you.
Right at the top.
Okay. And then one other thing I heard on last night's advisory committee, that the capital stabilization fund was increased by 100,000 to 2.066 million. Is that the case?
That will be the case.
Okay, that's 50 more than I had penciled in, and that's always more than welcome because it'll be 5 times oversubscribed. But every 50 helps is certainly the case. Okay, so why don't we go ahead and get started with the first item on the agenda, and we'll just have to keep track on this on the spreadsheet itself as we go, which is the facilities Elder Affairs HVAC request. I guess it's Elder Affairs and, well, no. Let's put it this way. It's written in a way that we can vote all the CEA items, including the HVAC request and any facilities items, that's for sure. So why don't we do exactly that? And with regards to CEA, where am I finding it here? So Elder Affairs, we've got the transport vehicle, 2 transport vehicles in here, net of the trade-in value. I just want to make sure these numbers line up.
Can we crank out HVAC and then we'll go to the other things? So
Yeah, sure. Let's do the
juggling
HVAC. That's fine, Corey. Let's do the HVAC first because there's no controversy around that. The HVAC system, Michelle, you've got in here is 6. Nick said it was 4. 400,000.
So Nick has a budgetary number. And as we know, anytime you have a budgetary number, once you go out to bid, we have these surprises and then we have to come back and the project is stalled. So what I would request is that we allot the $600,000, which is likely how it's going to come back after it's bid, and any money that is not used is returned. Because we've had many projects in the past that we've gone out to bid and they've just laid dormant because there's no additional money and we have to wait an entire new cycle to fund it.
So I'm confused. I thought on this one we were going to avoid going out to bid because the devices were on the state bid list, and the installer that he wants to use is basically on our retained.
He is a contractor for us.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I think we learned some warranty information. So, I mean, that's a judgment decision, and I'll let Nick talk about it.
Is Nick on? There's
Yep.
Nick.
Yep, he's here.
Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah.
Yeah, I believe we still have to go out to bid on the supplies themselves. So the contractor we can use, but we would still need to go out to bid on all the equipment. So you'd have different supply places bidding on the project.
Just in terms of the equipment itself.
Yeah. So there is a bid aspect to it still.
Okay, so we're not going to buy it direct from Mitsubishi. We're just going to buy it from a Mitsubishi dealer.
Yeah, you can't really buy directly from them. You have to go through one of the distributors around here, like whether it be Homans or any of them.
Okay, and sorry, go on. Just one other question.
Sorry, well, I'm just thinking about timing, and I'm just wondering if we're going to bid this immediately. If there's a situation here where we can approve the 600, it gets to town meeting, and then if we bid it within the 30-day window, we can at town meeting adjust that down. That way, we're square. We're not chasing funding later on. I'm just trying to find a happy medium here about moving forward on this, knowing that it's probably going to be over without chasing it later on. Does that make any sense?
I just don't know if we can go out to bid without the funding in place.
Gotcha.
Already.
Okay.
Michelle might know more about the ins and outs of like the timing of that.
So we can go out to bid as long as we have a caveat in there that we can't award the bid unless the funding is in place.
Okay.
So subject to funding at town meeting.
So that is a possibility to go sooner than town meeting, just to kind of see. Okay.
Okay, I mean, we're responding to a new number here, and it's obviously causing a little bit of a discussion. I'm less worried about providing and others. Look, I'm one voice, so I'm just going to speak, and then others can jump in. But I'm less worried about providing the funding as I am just sort of nailing down the appropriate number. And my head is spinning because this number just went up by 50%, even though I thought we had a plan to cost contain it and avoid bidding entirely. And it's a new set of facts.
But it sounds like it's intentionally inflated to protect us from a possibility. So that's why I'm suggesting if it goes horribly wrong, we can do it, or we can say we're not going to do it if it comes back at 625, we can just pull it, or recommend against it. But if we can get a number before the final town meeting vote, our final vote will be adjusted downward to reflect what the actual number is. And if everything goes to plan, it sounds like that's going to be in the fours, mid fours, not in the sixes. So, you know, it sounds like we're just doing this as like a safe circuit breaker sort of thing to be sure we can get through it.
Yeah,
so
I agree with that. And realistically, just going out to bid on the equipment should not be like a massive surprise. Usually the surprise comes when it's a full package deal.
Right.
So
I mean, you're going to identify the exact devices. You're going to tell them to bid the price,
Yes.
right? It's going to be devices and materials in terms of, you know, number of heads and then I don't know, maybe the number, you know, this linear feet of lines. So I'm just struggling why there would be so much variance around this, but I want to be constructive too. On the flip side, you know, we just increased this number by 200 grand. It's well, we've got to make all this fit, right? So it's not like we can just throw an extra 200 at this and call it a day.
So I think the intent, Brian, also was to do a short-term borrowing for this. So if it comes in a lot less, obviously we don't borrow the money. So there's that aspect of this as well, because I don't think this was going to be purchased with cash unless you thought otherwise.
Well, is that in the is it in the well, first of all, the default is always cash. So if we're borrowing it, that's a whole nother discussion. Is this 600 in the total?
Excuse me, Brian,
Yes.
we're starting to go back to a two-way discussion.
Mhm.
And I have some concerns, and I
Please.
would hope that others have other concerns too. So if we can keep this more a round robin rather
Sure,
than
Michael, go ahead.
a dialogue.
Please go ahead with
Actually,
your questions.
Okay, so I'm trying to catch up here. The original number I thought was 500,000 that we had discussed, and now it's up to 600,000. What I'm hearing is that it went up 200,000. The math doesn't make sense to me. The other concern I have is the borrowing rate. I understand that the water department was hit with 11 or 12% borrowing rate for one of their needs that arose out of financial management. So I am leery of extra money being bonded. So I just want to make that point. I'm hoping that others might have their thoughts to share.
on this, I mean, I think that the need is there, and I don't think it's going to get cheaper as we go down. I mean, I'd love for this to cost $100,000 or $25. That's just not reality. So I think we have a responsibility to the elder affairs in that building to do what's needed. And if this is what's needed, we do it. And I think we figure out a way to be sure we can recapture the money afterwards. But I don't really see any version of this where we can outthink how much this is going to be. So as far as I'm concerned, this is ready to go, and we'll figure out the tweak before. I'd like to pay for this in cash, to Mike's point, because it's expensive to borrow. And it seems like it fits even right now, kind of sort of not perfectly, but it fits enough. So that's my take on it.
My take, oh, go ahead.
Francine, go ahead.
This is just a comment. I guess I'm not quite sure then what the pre-vetting process, what that really does then when we're presented something initially, only to add in a contingency at this point. I mean, I thought that when departments come to us and they give us a number, it's because they've already vetted, this is what it ought to cost. And so I'm a little concerned about that, which I think you guys have already said. And giving them that buffer now takes away from other deals that we're not going to be able to approve now.
Agreed.
So can
Ralph, Susan.
Susan, you go ahead,
Yeah.
Susan.
No, I had in my notes, it was $500 as a rough, 500,000 rough estimate. 400,000 not re-engineered were my notes, so the delta's 1.
I agree that I don't particularly care for the fact that it's changed at the 11th hour here. But I do recall that this was a pretty important item that we take care of because of the fact that paying to maintain the system as it exists today is very expensive. And we probably eat up that delta rather quickly.
Michelle, is the town manager prepared to ante up funds from other operating intentions to make up this shortfall?
No, this is a capital budget request, and that's,
Right,
We're-
but looking
we're-
down
we're-
the other, okay,
it's being presented to capital budget to be funded by capital budget or through the stabilization fund or through a short-term borrowing through capital budget.
okay. So really our only choice then is to cut something else to get to our number.
Let me throw in something. I do not think that it's rigid that we only have the capital stabilization number that's now listed as 2 point something million. If in fact this costs 100,000 more, quite frankly, the budget is not fixed. The town manager can adjust his budget to increase whatever he needs to do. So I think if this is going to cost more than 400,000, you ought to put another 100,000 in, whatever it is, and make it cash. I don't think you should put borrowing in. We've always accepted the fact it will be cash, and later, if the town manager decides he wants to bond some of it, he can. We've done that, and that's the way it's worked in the past. We say we go with cash. We don't talk about bonding. But in fact, if it exceeds what we actually can afford, then there's no reason to go back, not to go back to Chris Senior and say, you'll have to kick in 100,000 more. We do that readily in between things all the time. It's just simply, we seem to have a rigid feeling about the capital stabilization fund, when in fact, it's just a capital appropriation that's arbitrary. That's all.
Right, it's a town manager's decision on how much the
Yeah,
town manager
that's
wants
all
to
it is.
allocate to the capital
That's
stabilization
all.
fund.
It's just an allocation. Tell me we need an adequate allocation, which includes this, and it might be 500,000. And that's all. Let's be being forthright about what do you have to ask for instead of being squeezed over the last 10 years. This is getting ridiculous, and adding 100,000 more is an absurdly low number, to be perfectly honest with you. So everything else, we can hire people, we can spend all kinds of money and all kinds of other things, but we can't actually get enough money in capital to actually do our capital appropriations. It's ridiculous.
Ralph, are you suggesting we should consider this at $500,000 or?
Yeah, I'd say make it a compromise at 500,000. I have no idea what the real numbers are, to be
Right.
perfectly honest with you, but that's a hell of a lot of money, to be perfectly honest with you, for a split system. So.
All right, what happens if I make a motion to accept, to make a recommendation for the HVAC system at 500,000?
Well, we need to wrap up deliberation first, so I paused. Is everyone done at this point?
I mean, I'm not going to support a appropriation for 500. I mean, this is just us with egos feeling like we can control how much things cost from our little screens.
No, it's not how much we
there's
can
no-
cost. It's how much
I'm
is
sorry.
being, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So again, if there's a squeeze and a problem and the town manager needs to backfill with free cash or something because something dropped off the end, we can do that. And I think Ralph's point is, I think, very on. I just tweak it a little bit, which is this is not part of our deliberation is to give feedback on what the priorities are. And I think we're all in agreement that this is the number one priority when it comes to, well, among the number one priorities, delaying this is an option. So the decisions in front of us are we either underfund it, that way it doesn't get done, or we fund it and hopefully it doesn't come in at the full amount, and then we can either revote it later on or it comes back to us and we can spend on something else and we just chase it later on. So, the idea that we intentionally underfunded to send some sort of message or some sort of whatever, I just, that doesn't make any sense to me. There's also other stuff on this list which I don't think is going to make it through. So we may end up underneath it anyway. So to me, again, we're hearing from our facilities director who we trust on this stuff that he needs a little extra slush to make sure he can get this done, but he doesn't think that he needs all of it. So we support that and we get this done. And then at the end of the day, hopefully it comes in under and we can all use that money somewhere else. But pretending like we have some control over what that is ahead of time, I think we're not assisting something getting done.
I don't think that's not the problem. The problem is coming in at the last second, Corey. The real problem is having it come in at the last second with a 50% increase. That's the real problem. Yeah, if it was 400, it was 400.
Wasn't 50%.
Yeah,
It was 500 and now
So
it
I
went to 500 to 600. So,
okay.
but again,
Mine says
they're just,
400.
they're
Sorry,
telling
mine
us,
says- Mine says 400.
20%.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mine says 400. Maybe it was 500. I don't see that on my list. So
I
Even
have a
at 500
question.
and 20%.
So I have a question on this, okay? And it gets back to my original question, which is the round trip that this has taken. The original list had it on as 500. Okay, the last time we discussed, when this actually came and we discussed it with Nick, we changed it to make it 400. So there's also a list out there with the number 400 on it, okay, which was subsequent to the discussion. Now it says 600. So that's the 200 delta. This is round trip that I'm just trying to understand. And Nick, I apologize to put you on the hot seat, but when we discussed this, it was, it was going to be 300 and change, and it had, if I recall, like a $50,000 buffer in there, and we had a plan to avoid putting this out to bid. I'm not suggesting that 600 is the wrong number. I'm just trying to understand what has caused us to change our view, and are we just putting in a 50%, a $200,000 buffer so that we don't have to come back and ask for more money, or do we really think it's going to cost 500 plus? I'm just trying to understand what exactly is in front of us and how we got from the last conversation to the current conversation.
I can help answer that. So I think
Please.
what we've learned over the past week is that purchasing the Mitsubishi units from where we originally were going to purchase from do not hold the same level of warranty. So if we're looking to have these warranted for, Nick, you'll have to help me out with the warranty period, but the warranty was almost void with the way we were going to do it before. So we're looking for the best solution for the town in the event something happens.
What warranty are we going to receive as a result of moving to a purchase from a place that's actually going to warranty it?
All right, I have a dog barking.
On the equipment itself, it's 7 years. And that's significant when you have the compressors, that's the bulk of the system. And then there's like a 1 year on some of the peripheral items within the system. But you don't get that unless you buy it from a vetted distributor like we would do. And realistically, going out to bid for the supplies, like we discussed before, is not, it's not the same as going out to bid for a full project,
Right.
with all the labor in that portion of it. So the realistic expectation is not to be near 600, but we've had way too many projects slip away and escalate in price when even people who are supposed to know the industry give us an estimated cost, and we blow through that, and nobody comes in even remotely close to their recommendation. So to Michelle's point and to Corey's point, this is just a safety fence, because it's been very hard in the last 2 years to budget for these larger projects.
Okay. And is our budget number, recognizing that variability out there, has our budget number actually changed since our last conversation? Is it, I mean, it was 300 and change plus a contingent, plus a contingency got us to 400 the last time we spoke. Has that changed, or are we just literally saying, okay, if the bids come back and they're just terrible, we still want to be able to proceed?
So in theory, it hasn't changed, but that being said, this was also back in January that we talked, so there's probably a little bit of something there. So no, but yes, a little bit. And then, yeah, it's just, there's just been so much variability, and purchasing things. I mean, some of the projects we've had related to HVAC, we put in one little split at a school, and it's $10,000-$12,000. It's they add up very quick.
Okay, I have one more question. So Michelle, I unfortunately don't, I've got a crappy network connection. Pardon me. I've got an insufficient network connection. So I don't have the spreadsheet up. I'm working off a PDF copy. The total of these requests is 2,130,000. I assume that includes the 600,000. Does it include all the items up above? Or does it exclude the ones that are, or does it exclude anything based on an anticipation that it might not get passed?
It includes all.
It includes everything. So we're at 2130. I just want to understand if this, how we make this fit before we start voting things through. And I apologize, I'm going to do some math out loud here, but I think before we started voting $600,000 items and then just finding ourselves out of money, we should do this. So we've got 1428 in the fund right now. Okay. You're saying we're going to pick up an appropriation of about 2.1. Is that correct? Michelle? Because it used to be 1996. So if it's going to be increased by 100,000, that should put us at about 2.1.
Correct.
Okay.
May I, quick question on this one. Why don't we have the additional 500,000 that was allocated to us in the fall town meeting?
It
It's in the
is. It's in the
stabilization.
1428, Ralph.
Pardon me?
It's in the 1428. We have like 928 of regular capital stabilization plus the 500 town hall stuff is in the 1428.
Really?
Yeah.
So that we're not getting 2.1 clean plus the 5.
We already got the 5. It's in the 1428.
So what's our total, simple question. If in fact the normal allocation is about 1.9 or 2, call it 2 for the sake of just argument here. And there is $500,000 additional available from unspent money that went into the capital stabilization fund in the fall town meeting. Isn't that 2.5? And if not, why not?
Okay, so the answer is no. First of all, 2.1 plus 500 would be 2.6.
That's right.
Okay, so that's the first reason why not. The second thing is we were at 928 prior to that 500 coming in. We were supposed to be at $1 million. So, the starting point of our discussion should be we're taking the fund balance back up to $1 million, which would take your 2.6, right? And it would remove 72 to get the fund balance, the ending fund balance pro forma back up to one flat.
I'm totally losing this conversation.
Yeah, me too.
I do not understand it.
Don't follow it.
Okay, let me start from the bottom. Okay. Prior to the 500 that we picked up at special town meeting, we had 928 in the fund. The fund should have had $1 million in it. The fund was overspent because every cycle we get pressured to overspend. So that's where we were prior to the 500. With
So,
me?
no, not really. You're saying that in fiscal 24, we're talking fiscal 24, right? That we overspent by $1 million?
No, we overspent by 72,000.
Well, that's not a significant number. So what did we spend in fiscal 24 out of our budget of our 1.9?
I don't have any idea, but we were left with 928 instead of the target of $1 million.
In other words, we actually allocated only half of our allocation?
No, Ralph. We roll $1 million fund balance in perpetuity. And there are operating reasons for doing that. We've always rolled $1 million fund balance.
But that has nothing to do with an allocation of 2.1 million, which is what we're getting, right?
Correct.
So you have $1 million plus 2.1 million plus 500,000. And you want to deduct $1 million, so you're down to 2.6.
Ralph, you don't have $1 million. You have 928. Okay.
Give me round numbers. I don't want to talk about fractions, just round numbers.
Okay. We had 900. I'll round it down. How about that? Because it's closer to down than up.
That was fiscal 24.
At the end of fiscal 24, after we received our appropriation in and we made all of our appropriations out, we were left with 900 as opposed to the $1 million minimum, as opposed to the minimum
Okay, fine. Go
target
ahead.
balance of $1 million. We
Okay, got
spent through it, which is something that we've done in the past, but we try to bring it back up to $1 million. We've done that in the past as well. Okay. So yeah, at the end of annual town meeting and all of its appropriations last year, we were at 900. In the fall, we picked up 500 at STM. You with me? For town hall. That brought us up,
1.4. We got
that
1.4.
brought us up to 1.4. That's the 1.4. Okay.
And now you're getting 2.1 more.
Correct. And you need to maintain a minimum balance of $1 million.
All right, got it. So you got 2.4 on top of the 2. 1.4 plus 2 is 2.4 less 1.
No. It's 1.4 plus 2.1. Okay. Gets you to 3.5. Okay. Minus 1 gets you to 2.5.
Right,
right?
that's right.
That should be where we're starting.
Wait a
That's
minute.
where we should be starting.
Hold on a second. 2.1. 1.421. 2.5 minus $1 million gets you 2.5.
We have that debt service built into that as well.
No, that's what we're missing. Thank you,
You have to
Michelle.
deduct your 500,000 for that. Fine.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
it's
You still have 2 million left.
it's 540 just to be clear, but yeah, you can round it to 500, so that gets you back down to 2.
That's right.
Okay, but it's
We have a clean 2 to work with.
a little less, but yeah.
All right, that's what I'm trying to say. There's a fair amount of money here.
And the balance shown on the spreadsheet is 1.5, not 2.
That's correct. That's the fund balance before we get an appropriation in, Mike.
That doesn't make sense with the rundown you just gave to me.
It's the fund balance before the appropriations in or out. It's the fund balance prior to this exercise.
Right. So that's what, yeah.
Let me ask this simple question then. How much money do we have to allocate for fiscal 25 from the capital stabilization fund?
About 2.
A little less than 2. You've got about 196.
Right. Because we're going to get a new allocation, but 500 of that gets slopped off because of the debt service. So the 1.4 is what we have right now. But typically when we're spending money that gets appropriated to us at town meeting. It comes in and out at the same time. So this is money we've collected not really in arrears, but this is money that's already sitting there that, again, 1 million of which we're going to keep rolling over, 400 of which is kind of a little bit of a slush. And if we get 1.5 now, or if we get 2 now, 2 appropriated at town meeting, and 540 gets rolled up for debt service, but we got the 4 whatever, it gets us to just under 2, to Ralph's point. Really rough math.
Plus 100,000 that was added.
No, it's already in there. We just did all this math with the 2.1, but
Yeah, the 2.1, it's not on the spreadsheet yet. So Mike, if you want to put at the bottom of the sheet to be appropriated at 25, you put the 2.1, and then under that you say to be taken out during 25, 540, and then you get kind of back to where we are. And then you take 1 out for what's going to roll over to 25 because we don't want to spend it. You end up at 2. Do you want to just do that on the spreadsheet and show you?
That's exactly where I am. Yeah, that's what I think it is. Right.
it leaves you with
But I'm
one.
only pointing this out. It makes it possible to do these things and makes it easier to go vote these things. That's all. So we can vote these, right?
Understand. So, and this is why I'm responding to the fact that it just went up by 200,000 because we.
Well, I agree. That seems out too much to actually.
I mean, it is what it is, but like it just blew the budget, frankly. So we have 1960 to spend, and we've got 2130 in requests.
Yeah.
And as of the last call, the whole thing fit. That's the problem.
I agree. I would say move on from that right now and take a look at all the other ones that are easy. Come back to that one and see what we got left.
Agree.
We can, I mean, if we vote all the small stuff through, I mean, we're then going to make a decision to shut down the building. I mean, I almost.
Just get a sense of the meeting so we can get through it. I just want to, even if you don't vote every one of them, do we have a sense that yes, we're going to vote yes? Do we have a sense we're going to vote in the next one?
Yeah.
Yes?
Okay, we can do that.
that makes it possible to get through this, you know?
Yep. Yeah, it's just a $200,000 surprise that I was not prepared for on this call.
We agree. I agree totally.
Yeah. Okay, so let's try and make the best of this situation. And bonding's not the answer. So let's just go through this and figure out where people are on these different items. So you're suggesting, Ralph, that we pull these but not vote them, and then we can move to vote them as a slate? Is that your suggestion?
I would do that, unless, and everyone that has some controversy, we'll put that aside and say we'll leave that. But get every one of these, sensitive meeting on every one that you can, and then get them voted as a whole, and then we can come back and say, here are the controversial ones. What do we got left here? So
Okay. Well, unfortunately, we have a posted agenda which we have to follow, so we're gonna have to.
I know.
We're gonna have to do that. Okay, so all right, we are where we are on the 600. What are the other elder affairs requests? I just want to make sure these tie out to what we had. We had a transport vehicle at 25. Just want to make sure these numbers carry over from last week.
And a van for 42. Yeah, they line up from last week. Sheet. I've got them both side by side.
That's
Okay.
what I've got too. Right. Okay.
Yeah, the 42,175 is now up to 45, but I assume somebody has a reason for that. We don't need to hear it.
Okay.
Okay.
Escalations. Okay.
Yep. Okay. Does anyone have anything they need to discuss about these two vans, or is that something that is non-controversial?
I think they
The
have to be
caravan is
held
now
out.
45.
I think they have to be held out to see if we might have to cut them to make the 200.
Sorry, Corey, I misspoke. And Michael, I don't mean to cut you off. I heard what you just said. I'm not debating it. Corey, I misread the spreadsheet. The caravan is still in here at 42,175, so it's fine. I misspoke.
Okay, cool.
My stigmatism was kicking in 3 lines up, so. And Michael, you said we have to hold out. We're not voting any of this stuff until the end, so this is just a poll. Is there any controversy around these items? If we had the money, would we do this? Does anyone have any further questions?
If we had the money, we'd do this, but we
Okay.
don't have the money. That's why we're here, is we
Yep.
don't have the money and we're trying to
So-
set priority.
My recommendation just for process here. So the agendas are supposed to be guidelines that no one misses anything. Considering we're at 6:45 is the last item here, I think a reasonable argument could be made that all things are on the table throughout this time frame. And
Okay.
if we want to, as a committee, because of something that just happened to us within the last 48 hours, we can say we're readjusting the schedule on paper to adjust for the new reality of us needing to prioritize these things.
Right.
Because we're not talking about enterprise funds yet. That's at 7 o'clock. So I think everything can be on the table. I don't think we're in violation of anything here, if we want to do it that way. So
that's
I'd
fine.
recommend we do priorities first and
That's,
see where we end up.
you want to do priorities? You just want to go down the list?
I was going to say we can knock out things that we know, things that are X, Y, Z of a lease.
You have a view, so why don't you
buses
go
and
ahead and lead that,
Chromebooks.
Corey? Because I don't have a view. I don't have a view. To me, they're just all equal, but go ahead.
Uh,
Do you want me to share
Oh,
my
okay.
screen for all the capital requests?
Sure, please. I think that would be constructive.
All right, so I'd start off just with, again, anything that's a lease where we're not going to not pay the lease, unless I'm misunderstanding this. So I'd begin with, a motion to recommend $90,000 for the bus lease for the diesel buses on Road 22.
Okay, so the schools don't come on until later, and
Do I have that? Do I have that wrong? Yes, you're right. My apologies. I was just going top bottom. You're right. I didn't see that on the thing. Never
let's put
mind.
the school stuff aside until the schools, we actually hit the schools on the agenda.
So one thing which I'm comfortable knocking off early is the level 3 charging stations for $45,000. I know we talked about it briefly, but I think it's a lot of money, and seeing that the replacement costs are, lots of money right now, I think we need a better strategy before launching into this program. So that's my feeling on that. So I'd be inclined to knock that off the list for our recommendations in a negative.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, I agree.
I agree as well.
Okay.
All right.
Well, there's
then-
there's a majority that has that position, so I think that pretty much settles it.
All right, motion to not recommend. Well, do you want to do a motion to recommend and then we'll just go against it? So motion to
Um,
recommend the level 3 charge.
I think the suggestion was we're going to do this as a slate, Corey. We're going to go down the list and categorize things and then make a motion to approve X, and that's it.
Fine with me.
We can vote again, and we can also make a motion to vote the other things, and people will vote nay, right? And that way we'll get the two groups.
Fine with me. Great.
Okay, what else?
Things that are DPW line 14. Motion to I would say that that's something that it's time to replace that. That I remember that truck being old and we rely on it quite a bit.
This is the 175,000?
Yeah,
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
I'd agree with that. Anyone feel differently?
Agree.
no.
Great.
I would also include the service lift.
I would agree that's a safety thing.
Agreed.
Yep. And
Anyone
on the
else?
scale,
Anyone disagree?
sorry.
Great. Green.
You've got the RTF scale.
I think the scale we should hold off on. That's a big chunk of money and it is kind of operational. We're holding it together, and if it breaks, I think we can deal with it. It's not super mission critical. I just leave that to the end to see if we have enough money for it.
Okay. Question mark.
I mean, it is mission critical. My apologies that wasn't well phrased, but I think we can leave it alive for another 12 months if need be.
I think it's relatively low usage, as you probably know if you've been to the dump a lot, as I have. So,
Yeah.
The issue, Ralph, is that they weigh the trailers as they go out. Is how we get billed.
Oh, you're right. You're right.
But it is like a double check against what the vendor charges us. So there's a that.
So the
So-
vendor weighs it too.
Correct.
Okay, we're just double checking it to make sure we're not getting gouged.
So I just
Correct.
want to add that in Brian's priorities list, the scale was a #1 priority over the service lift.
Okay, then we'll take that recommendation. I just don't want someone to get crushed under a lift.
So Brian's here and can probably speak to it as well.
That's fine. It's a simple question. If one of these gets cut, which one does we want to have cut? Mr. Joyce? Is he not joining, Michelle?
He's here. Brian?
Okay. Brian Joyce, are you there?
Hi, sorry, yeah, a little slow connecting. Yes,
Okay,
so priority wise, the service lift is in better shape than the RTF scale. That we feel that that's going to corrode and fail within the next year, and it does. Anybody who has anything bigger than a barrel full, which is a $10, anybody with a pickup truck gets weight going in, going out. So it would hamper operations pretty significantly and a lot of arguments.
Okay, and you're comfortable from the safety, you're comfortable when you factor in the safety concerns for your team that the service lift can wait if we have to cut something.
Yes, I've talked about this a lot with Carl and Dan and also and the scale was definitely priority over the lift. So we would defer on that for a year.
Okay, that's all we need. Thanks.
Great, thanks.
Perfect, Brian. Police, we've already done the police. So anything that's pink is already voted in, so we can skip those line items.
Anything that's pink is voted in?
Correct. Yeah, anything that's pink is stuff we voted back on March 4th.
Yep.
We did police and fire March 4th for some of the stuff. So
We did everything.
it's all the way.
We did everything the first responders asked for, except for the parking ticketing solution, if I recall correctly.
Correct.
And they're here tonight to discuss that again.
Okay.
Can we jump into that? I mean, last time the questions were, do we need two of them? Is there any way we can bring it down? Because I remember it being even higher than 71, but my memory's foggy at this point. But if we could find another 30, 40,000 out of that request, we're getting close to our gap.
You want to promote the chief, Michelle?
They're promoted, they're coming in.
Hey there.
Hey, Bill.
Trying to get the camera working here, sorry. Stand by. Having problems with the camera, but you can hear me, right?
We
Yes.
can. Yes, Bill.
Yes, we can, Chief.
We've seen you on TV. We know what you look like.
Right at you. Here I am. Hey, so we're working on this to go back to the parking and RTF enforcement. One of the questions from last time. Well, the first thing is, come July 21st, we're not going to have the ability to issue parking tickets. There'll be no enforcement. The contract is expiring, and the vendor at this point is not responsive. We have thousands of dollars in tickets sitting in the queue that haven't been collected, and the vendor, we just can't get a hold of them. They are no longer on the bid list. The vendor that we're using, we're having trouble just even getting a hold of anybody at their New York office. So that's what's driven this. So we have to do something if we want parking enforcement going forward. We have started discussions with the vendor. Michelle, myself, and a couple of our officers have met with them. This number that we're looking for this solution is $71,000, 71,093. And that'll carry us through the first year, as well as get us the equipment we need to have a parking enforcement program. There is a yearly charge. I talked to Chris Senior this afternoon, and we are prepared. He is prepared to budget the $20,000 to $25,000 per year to keep this program operational, because there are ongoing costs as far as the collections and things like that. But are there any specific questions about what we're trying to do here? And it's basically we're trying to automate the process, get away from paper tickets altogether. And at this point, like I said, our current vendor has failed.
Chief, out of that 71, what's a fixed cost versus a variable cost? If like what's the minimum? If we need to set it up, we're spending 50 grand, and if we want two, we're spending 70. I mean, just give me some sense of what's fixed, what's variable in that number.
Hardware is 42,000. I'm just going to use round numbers, 42,400. That's the hardware and the extended warranties for the hardware. Hardware includes handheld units, printers, in the back end, really. The monthly and annual charges, it's 28,700 yearly, and that includes $2,215 per month maintenance fee. And they also take a cut of each ticket to process. It's approximately $3, give or take. We're still in negotiations over that, so we are trying to sharpen our pencil with two vendors right now. I'm
that 71 is both software or license for a year as well as hardware.
It's
hardware is 44.
Yes, correct.
Okay,
that's to get the whole program up and going.
Right, but
Gotcha.
I'm sorry, can I ask a question here? So of the 71,000, how much is truly capital and how much is operational?
42.4 is hardware. The 28.6 is monthly and annual charges.
So I would say we should agree to the 42,000 and ask the town manager to cover those operational expenses for the police department. because they're not capital expenses. They're operational. Or am I wrong? Is that right?
Well, the first year, this is to get us up and going with license. Well, it's 28,660 per year. So the first year would be funded through capital, and then going forward, it'd be funded through the annual budget, because we did not budget for that this year.
But we should.
Well, we didn't.
And we're trying to make up $200,000 short plus $200,000 shortfall. So we're just trying to find those expenses that are truly capital and use that as our benchmark. So Michelle, can the budget pick up those operational expenses for the first year so that it's first year and every other year?
I don't believe so. I don't believe there's room in the budget this year to pick up those costs.
So you guys made an assumption that capital's budget would agree to both a capital expense and an operational expense?
Well,
on this
Michael,
line?
with all due respect, a lot of these items in here have operational components to them. And I don't know that this has ever been a discussion. Anytime we're asking for capital, I mean, Chromebook lease, with some of the school requests are also have some operational components to them. So
Just by way of background, when we did this the first time, probably about 6 years ago, this is the way we structured it before. The first year was covered through the capital process, and going forward, it's budgeted. So that's where this model came from.
Yeah, it's also what we've done with the IT, because there's, with our IT infrastructure, there's the initial capital and the installation. So there's the equipment, there's the installation, and there's the annual maintenance. We've included the first year of maintenance as part of the, get it up and running sort of all-in package. But then the subsequent years of maintenance are carried in Ron's IT budget. So there is symmetry here to the way that we've handled this.
There is a training component too, and they have to set up the whole back end of this. That's some of the soft charges of that, just that the paper that the tickets are printed on, the printing itself. Some reason that the paper that's printed on is really, really expensive. But that's how it breaks down.
Bill, just a quick one. How much do we actually collect in the way of tickets in terms of dollars?
So in 2023, calendar 2023, we issued $73,500 in fines. We collected 47,500. So there's about 35% of them that are outstanding, and a lot of that I'll have to attribute to issues with the vendor.
Okay.
So obviously, some are appealed and dismissed, but for calendar 2023, I'm talking about fines we issued with the officers actually written. Have written 73,500. 2022 is 61,700, and then in 20 and 21 are sort of off years due to COVID, but we're down around 20,000 and 30,000. There is in the packet, there is a statistical data chart, and if you don't have that, I can send it over.
I'm sure I've got it somewhere, right? Well, it sounds to me as though you could afford to actually pay for the annual charges on this anyway out of those numbers. Basically, it sounds like it to me. So,
yeah, the cost going forward are anywhere between, depending on how many tickets are written, probably between $20,000 and $23,000. And we take in somewhere around 75.
So you end up with 50, somewhere in that range, right? Yeah. So it seems as though whether we do or don't include this particular $26,000 number in this one, going forward, the tickets should support the actual maintenance of that product, as I see it. Is that correct?
It's actually a moneymaker. The ticket.
Yeah, it should be a moneymaker.
Yeah.
It should actually cover it. So somehow or other, that's the way you handle that. The other thought is, as you know, I am viscerally opposed to using cameras to ticket people. I understand what you've said about it in the past. I remember it well. I just do not think one should do that. I don't want to get it started. I think it's unfair to people because it isn't always necessary to actually charge somebody or have them go back to you, even though there might be an appeal period. I do not support that at all. And I would hope you could reduce this 71,093 by some amount, which does not include cameras at the RTF. I think that's a mistake.
Well, the thing with the RTF is, you know, there's someone enforcing this anyhow. They're using personnel to do it. They have to detail a worker to stand there and check, you know, stickers. And, you know, they often get in confrontations. As a matter of fact, we've had officers called down there due to confrontations. You know, in the past, we've had two officers assaulted as a result of this. You probably remember that, Ralph.
I've confronted people too, but it's rare, and because everybody is photographed going in, I find that unacceptable. I do.
Well, the plates are photographed going
But
in.
that-
and
but that
it's more of
relates-
well, it's a security issue as well. You know, you don't. I don't think people understand the extent of people entering that place after hours.
I understand it. I don't want to argue it anymore. I'm utterly opposed to that approach, as has most people in everywhere I know. If you read the press, everyone does not like to have their plates photographed. Don't know, in other words, who's collecting that data, and it's an invasion. I do not think we should get involved in that. I do think you have to have this hardware. I think you need the hardware, so I don't doubt a bit you should have it. It's just, do not use an arbitrary way of deciding who is violating and not, unless you're physically doing it yourself. So that's how I look at it.
You know, just to be clear, it's not arbitrary at all. There's a white list that the plates are checked against, and it kicks out the plates that are not on the list. And Brian Joyce gets those don't go to us.
So I'll just give a little background color. So the RTF people are only flagged if they're, you know, if the staff notice that they don't have a windshield. So we're understaffed up there. We have been perennially, so we're not manning the booth, and stickers are not always caught. If you're caught not having a sticker, then you're told to get a sticker, and if there's, you know, issues with it, we take down the license plate, and then subsequent to that, we have to contact the police. They run the plate in the next couple of days, and then we send them a letter in the mail. This would kind of automate all that, and we would actually get an idea of how many violators there are. Right now, we're just kind of getting the ones that are caught. We've had people from, you know, Nantucket. We've had people from, you know, a lot of folks from Hull, some Kingston, people who are just not even in town coming to use the facilities.
All due respect, I appreciate what both of you have said. I am viscerally opposed to this. Absolutely. It's not a good thing. We should never start it.
I would not drive on Route 3, Ralph, if you don't want to be photographed. Your license plate. Don't use Route 3, any of the bridges.
Yeah.
Parts of 3A.
I mean,
out of town.
I respect the opinion. I think it's just it's basically saving a manual process that goes through.
I understand.
For people before, you know, this would just kind of kick it out.
I understand. I just, you know what I think.
So Ralph, your position has certainly been heard. I want to pull other members on the committee. It seems to be somewhat of a policy issue as much as it is a capital issue that you're raising. I do clearly hear the argument that what we're doing right now is somewhat arbitrary, which is sometimes we enforce, sometimes we don't. It involves a human interaction, which sometimes goes poorly. And this would be non-arbitrary at all. You're either you either pull in and have a sticker, or you don't, and you get a ticket. It just takes, to me, it just takes a lot of all that arbitrariness and sort of haggling out of the picture. And people can either get their ticket in the mail and come and choose to, you know, argue it, or they will probably just write a check and send it in.
Just Brian, just to interrupt real quick. You don't get a ticket the first time. I don't even think the second time.
So you get 2 warnings.
I believe it's
two. So there's it's a kind of a progressive list. It's a letter. The first one's a warning. Next one is a $50 fine, and then the third one is another $50 fine with a suspension.
Okay. So you
really haven't
got a
gone to
warning
the
the first time around. You don't get a ticket in the mail the first time. So you get a second one. It's kind of your own fault. I mean, that's my feeling. I don't really have a problem with the technology looking at license plates. I hear what you're saying, Ralph. It doesn't bother me one bit. There's a lot more than that being gathered on us, you know, probably as we speak right now. So
Brian,
what do people feel about it?
Brian, I'm with you. I mean, people, anyone in town more than a year knows the rule. Follow the rules, get your sticker, and there isn't a problem. So I'm for it.
Anyone else have a view that they want to share? I don't want to force people onto a hot seat.
I'm not opposed to it.
Okay. Okay, so we've got a handful that we've got some differing opinions, but a handful that are not opposed to this clearly. And Michael, I hear your point with regards to the, including in the first year. And you're right, by the way. It's there's a strong argument to be made that the operating cost is operating cost, but I'm very hesitant to set a different precedent than we've used with other departments, particularly IT, where the numbers are a lot bigger. So I don't really have a suggestion. I mean, if someone has a suggestion to change this, let's hear it. I'm not really sure where I come out on changing this one.
Can I take a weird left-hand turn? It's both
Please.
off topic and on topic. Sorry, and this is I'm just doing math here on the sheet, trying to just do this silly exercise. If we chop out the town hall things, we don't have a budget problem. And didn't we appropriate $350,000 in free cash for town hall at special town meeting? So don't we already have a fund for that?
It was 500, and it's in the numbers that we're currently absorbing, Corey. So the problem is the reverse. We've got 500.
Okay.
Sorry, go on.
Oh, okay. So we're already counting that in the 500 that you were talking about that catches us back up.
It's in the 142A down below is my whole point.
Okay, I didn't know if that was a different appropriation than what you were talking about. Okay.
No, it went into the
apologies.
regular way capital stabilization fund. So
okay, I didn't know if it got carved out somewhere else. Okay, my apologies. I as the libertarian side of me fully agrees with Ralph, but I also trust our guys and know why it's needed. So I wouldn't object to moving forward with it, other than kind of holding my nose a little bit.
my libertarian side agrees, by the way, Corey. I just what bends it for me at the end of the day is paying someone to sit there paying someone to do what a camera can do for a lot less money. I mean, if we're going to do it, just do it cost efficiently.
And we have a lot of, when I was in select board, we had a lot of issues with parking enforcement. That was a big thing for downtown businesses. And it seems to have gotten better now that we've, the CPD has been able to really put some resources to it. So to kind of, on one hand, tell them to take it seriously, on the other hand, pull the rug out from under them on the tools they need to do it would seem not a little bit very hypocritical. So
this frees up a person to do parking enforcement somewhere else. All right. Unless there's a consensus for a change on this, let's move on.
Mark that.
Yeah, so are you gonna highlight that green then or no?
Yeah, Michelle's driving.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's okay. I've been
Feels
trying
like
to control our mouse for a while here.
Feels like it's a green to me unless 3 people say no. Okay. So that gets us down to the town hall items, which were within our time frame to discuss. So why don't we discuss them? Is that right? Everything above that, with the exception of the Parker Avenue stuff, is we've covered.
Library patron computers discussion.
Oh, you're right, Corey. Let's do that first. So Corey, you got an update there?
Yeah, I think we have Bronwyn. Do we have Bronwyn on? So
do.
Bronwyn can bring us all up to speed rather than have me do it. Just repeat what she should be repeating. That's okay.
Okay, and just to be clear, I don't think there was a question as to need. There was a question as to the cost relative to the number of the units. My recollection was.
Okay, yeah. So the kids' computers, which are very special, are the big driver of the cost. I think they're $32.50 a piece. The
Okay.
actual workstations are only $1,000, which, you know, again, we can all go to Best Buy and buy something for $800, but that's just not how procurement works. So yeah, that's what, and it did, that number did come down a little bit with Dan. But there's a little bit of wiggle room in there for software licenses.
Okay, so the bottom line, Corey, is you've scrubbed the numbers, which caught our eye, and the numbers are real. They're driven by the kids' computers, and this number's real, the 27,000. Is that the net summary?
Exactly. Yes, the vast
Okay.
majority of that number is the kids' computers. Yeah.
Okay. Does anyone else? I don't think there was any debate after the last go round as to whether or not, you know, we should or need to do this. Does anyone have any other issue that they want to cover on this? Okay, sounds like our question's been addressed. So I'm going to suggest that we make this a green for now, unless I hear a handful of voices that say no.
Agree.
Great.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you, Bronwyn. So that's the carpet replacement, which was, it's the next one down, Michelle, should be green. It's line 7, not 6. 6, I think we already voted.
No, 6 was voted by the library CTL.
Yeah, we already voted 6, so that's, you don't have to green that.
There's no amount in there.
You weren't funding it.
That's
You
coming
just-
from
you
our
voted the appropriation.
They're funding out of the library fund.
I
yes.
see. Okay.
That's why there's no number next to it. So we've approved the spend from a different source. Okay, so that brings us down to the town hall roof. Now Michelle circulated a handful of items on of communications on this. Let me just sort of cut to the issue that caught my eye, assuming everyone's had a chance to look at what Michelle circulated, which is, you know, we've got a letter from the Architectural Access Board that says even the town roof at 285 is going to trigger access compliance for the entire building. At least that's how I read it. Am I reading that correctly, Michelle? And what does that, so let's just say we trigger it. What does that mean? What needs to be done in order to meet that requirement?
So we'd have to look further into the accessibility studies that have been done in the past, but just off top of mind, we come with a second egress to the second floor. I know Brian Joyce is on, he may be able to speak to it. I know he's had conversations about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think,
Hallway compliant.
sorry. So I was talking to John, it's the egress to the second floor, another egress, John said, Helen said it wouldn't be required, but we would need to look at the hallway and likely get a variance. But I think all this needs to be confirmed. You know, we'd have to look at the building, fresh eyes, and say what type of variance we would need. But the two, you know, I think when we go out to bid, I think that number is very conservative for the roof. I think we probably got, you know, like 110 square probably on the roof, you know, at 1,000 square. I think it's pretty conservative, but Michelle was saying that we needed a design because it's a public building. Is that right?
So that's already done, right?
So you need the scope of services. The design is not already done. The only design that we had that was done was for a building that had the historic building and a replacement of the annex. So this would be a renovation of the annex roof, not a replacement. So it's totally different. We got a cost for the design. The cost came in at $15,000.
Do we have a request for the design work? I mean, is that the next step?
Yep. So we have one proposal now for the design work at $15,000. We're waiting for a second because you always like to have two to compare to one another before awarding. As soon as we can award that, they will get the design and specs and we'll be out to bid.
Sorry, I mean, that's a
Uh,
silly question. And someone else has one too. We're gonna hit that in a second, whoever that was, I apologize, but
That was me.
what exactly are we designing?
So it's just a statute in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, you must design a roof of a public building.
So we're gonna
Just
pay
shingles
someone
and nails. right?
500, sorry, 15 grand to design the replacement of shingles, or is there more to it than that?
Well, it's more to it, and we spoke about it last time. It's the gutters,
Okay,
it's the entire
okay. There's a little more to it. Okay,
project.
so we need another one. Sorry, Corey, I cut you off.
So, one thing which I flagged, Michelle, on the report was the idea that the ADA accessibility is for the publicly accessible buildings. Since we closed down the second floor of historic town hall, and we're not going to sprinkler it. Does that give us a little bit of a path forward where we don't need to address any issues over there because we've closed it down? Or is that technically the secondary egress for the top of the annex?
Exactly.
So we need to, all right, we can just buy you guys a really big slide. Okay. That'll be your second exit. All right. So there's no way that we can just ignore the historic portion when it comes to the ADA accessibility. Okay. Not ignore, but use the
Okay.
annex.
Let me let me try to put a sharp point in this. So it sounds like we do not know what the total scope of the accessibility requirements are going to be if we trigger this. Is that a fair statement, Michelle?
I would say that's fair.
Okay. And I would assume that people on this committee have no intention of triggering this without knowing what we're triggering. Is that fair? Okay. Great. So we're not going to trigger it. The assessed value of the building right now is $941,500. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So
As of what date?
30% of that's 282,450 based on my math. So that's the max you can spend without triggering this. Do the studies factor into that, or are they the 30%?
They factor into that number. Yes.
They do factor into that number?
Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
ask
No,
a question?
I thought you were talking about the 285. The study is included in that 285
No,
number
no,
that I
no,
have here.
no. We've got a
The
282,
study does not
450.
factor into that number. No.
We've got a 282, 450 cap. That's the max we can spend, above which we triggered the 30% threshold in the accessibility requirements, is my point. And of that 282, 450 that we can spend, do the estimate, when you pay someone for estimate for services like design services, whatever, are they do they get included in the spend towards the 30% calculation, or no? I don't know if my question's clear.
The answer is yes. It's the entire project. So the design would go into the project.
Okay.
And here, yes.
So the amount we can spend on the roof is way less than 282, 450, because if we're spending, it's minus the 15 for the design service, it's minus whatever we pay for the sprinklers to stay under that 30%.
What sprinklers?
There's a design line in here for sprinklers.
Get the 45.
Yeah, the 45.
So we can't do both of these without triggering. Is that your point,
No.
Brian? Yeah.
My point is you can spend 282, 450 total for everything. Based on the
So part of me is
assessment.
also, well, I don't want to be a spoiler on this, but like this, without a clear answer on how much the building is worth, it's really
Yeah.
hard for us to do any sort of planning going forward. I don't want to just say we say no. I mean, I know the roof is in bad shape, but if we're on the edge already and we're risking really serious issues, it would make sense to me to say, let's get a handle on the assessment, which hasn't been done in 20 years, and see what it really is. And then we can actually have an executable plan, which may be more than one thing.
Yeah.
So I just,
I agree. We're going to the
Go
same place, Corey. My point is there's really not much we can do without triggering this based on the assessment and the way that the math adds up. You can't do these three things, including the roof. You could do the two studies, or you could do just the roof and skip the studies. But frankly, I'm more focused on, getting an unrestricted permanent occupancy permit than I am replacing the roof. Just me speaking out
I-
loud. Do we
No,
have
I don't disagree. That's the thing is, again, we're going to spend money on a building, which is potentially going to prevent us from spending any more money, but we also can't use the whole building. So we really have a, chicken or egg problem here, but we don't know what size the nest is, just to run this,
I mean, I'm
analogy
just thinking
far.
out loud that like the roof might last another 3 years, but Howland's requirements need to be addressed now if we want to use the building. So, Michelle, do we have at this point a clear written list of items that need to be resolved in order to get an unrestricted permanent occupancy permit from John Howland, or is this just
We will
still
need,
nebulous?
we will need to get the building sprinklered.
Well, I know, but I don't want to sprinkler the building and then have him come up with something else. This can't be a game of whack-a-mole.
So
Like before we spend a dime on this, we should know what the list is and know that when we spend the money to address that list, we're done. Does that make sense?
yes, it makes sense. I don't think that list necessarily comes from John Howland. I think that list maybe comes from an independent study that should be done of what exactly all the code compliant issues of the building and how we address them. Because every time we go back, we're looking at one item, and then as you're saying, it triggers something else. So without a comprehensive study of exactly what needs to be done, we're going to be right back where we are today.
And
Unfortunately.
this is your feeling towards an occupancy permit. Like I'm not worried about accessibility. I just want to know what John Howland needs to reverse his position that he had to condemn the building.
So John Howland's initial position was the building had to be sprinklered.
Okay. All right. So we're gonna.
I could just say it's sprinklers and fire alarms together.
Yeah. So I'm going to make a suggestion to the committee, and I want to hear other people's views on this. I think we as a committee should formally request of John Howland a specific list of items that he needs to have resolved in order to issue a permanent occupancy on this building. I'm kind of tired talking about this. How do other people feel about that?
I think that sounds logical.
I agree.
Anyone else?
I would just broaden it a little bit to say, I think what we're missing is a meaningful execution plan here, which then is signed off from a third party or whoever it is. It's not just John as the arbiter here. It's how are we going to get this done? I think it's the broad.
Well, we're going to need a plan based on what John comes up with, and John is the arbiter as to what happened the last go around. So in the end, he does have the ability to come up with more items. I don't want to hear about more.
Well,
items.
no, but I mean, he doesn't. I mean, his job is to enforce the regulations as he sees them. But if we have a third party who says this is what it is, he's not going to come out and say, well, they're wrong. I mean, I'm just saying that the rules are the rules and he has to interpret them. He doesn't make the rules, but somebody else can also say that we're good. And if it's an architect and a firm that does this, then we're good. There's multiple ways to get to the end here. But we just don't have no execution plan to get to where we need to go, nor do we know even where we're trying to go. Are we trying to, are we just trying to put the roof on and then leave it? Are we trying to really save the whole building at this point? Are we trying to just keep it alive? That way someone else can take it over, without even the overarching strategy. It's really hard to even contextualize this stuff.
Yeah. I think the first step to even having that conversation is finding out what it takes to actually reoccupy the old building, which right now is fundamentally condemned. To me, that's the first step. And then we figure out from there where we go.
Well, if we even need to reoccupy the old building, I mean, do we need to occupy upstairs? I mean, there's policy decisions here.
Right now, we can't
Which haven't
occupy
been
the
made clear.
downstairs.
Yeah, that's true. But also the downstairs, the floor isn't, that was condemned as well for hosting anything. So we sprinkler the building, we don't need the offices, and we can't use the floor. So.
Does anyone have a view as to a different first step to unravel this? It just feels to me like the very first step is to find out what it takes to occupy the building.
I agree.
I agree. Oh, go ahead, Susan.
I agree with you, Brian, because we have to have somewhere to operate our government while we figure out the bigger problem.
I agree that we need a first step that goes through John Hallen. We have a citizens petition warrant article that specifies 3 major items and 1 minor item to be addressed in order to continue using 41 Highland Avenue, both the 1857, 1929 wing and the 1986 wing. That is in front of, will be in front of town meeting. From what I understand, John Hallen can either accept or decline a consultant's observation or consultation. It's up to him to enforce the building codes as they exist. Now, we've had some controversy on trying to apply current codes which don't apply to this building. This building, as I understand it, I'm no expert, but my understanding from the citizens petition group is that this building is governed by the codes in effect when it was first opened, when the annex was opened in 1986 or 7. What our problem is the select board, if not the town manager's office, declining to engage with the citizens petition group and their recommendation, their suggestion, their proposal to town meeting. But I agree with you, Brian. We do need to hear directly from John as to what he would require to reopen the historic wing.
So Michael, I apologize. Michelle, Ralph dropped and he's trying to get back in. Michael, I apologize for the interruption.
Sure, no, that's fine.
He should be all set.
Sorry, Michael, were you were all set?
Yeah, that's my position right now.
Okay,
Can I throw in a couple of thoughts on this thing?
sure.
First, we're going to have to deal with 521 CMR. That is really the only issue associated with any work we're going to do if it exceeds 30% of the full and fair market value of the building. That's the law. However, what happens if you exceed that 30% is an important question. And the answer is, if you exceed it, you need to actually make sure that you meet accessibility requirements, basically requiring ADA accessibility. How do you get at that? You actually just simply go out and get a consultant, a good consultant, to come in and tell you where do you fail it. Those things tend to be widths of doorways, obstructions that you might actually run into if you were handicapped, and or things like levers on doors. These are not major items, and therefore my suggestion would be, in order to get through this whole set of questions about what exceeds 30% of the full and fair market value, is in fact simply to hire somebody to go tell you what it is that you're missing. That starts the project, so you know where you are. Number 2, with regard to full and fair, the assessed value of the building is not the value that you should use. It's a value associated with exactly what a buyer would pay for the building if in fact it was a full and open purchase. So using a 2011 valuation as we are now using is not relevant anymore. So that's the number 2 thing. Number 3 is, what do you do about all the things that need to get done? Very few of the items, even the ones in the citizen petition, will get done without some engineering and or assessment prior to their actually getting done, so that you can bid the job. And that includes everything from the chiller to the sprinklers to the roof to, I'm trying to think of all the other things that need to get done. But my view of this is, you need to actually have an allocation of money associated with the various kinds of engineering assessments that you can then go out and use as for bid documents. It seems so obvious. And all you have to do, I think, is we have to do as a committee and say, what are all of the things that we think need to be done and to make these buildings useful, at least for the reasonably short term. And this is so straightforward to do that. The only other point I'd make about all of this is if in fact you want to get anything done before the next town meeting, you would need to have an allocation, even if it's an estimate. And if you don't make it, you don't make it. So the allocation there needs to be some allocation associated with anything you think needs to get done between now and June 30th, 2024 or 2025. And then you'd have something moving. Otherwise, we don't move in any direction, whatever, as it turns out. I also echo and I've been listening, but I couldn't talk, the position that we cannot have John Hallen providing variable judgments on this thing. And every time we turn around, he's got a new judgment on this. And we can't be living with 6-month extensions. Either we are fully occupied and have an occupancy permit, or we don't if we're going to do these various projects. This seems very straightforward to me. But this committee, if it's going to provide any value, is going to have to say, we need the money to actually hire the people who would provide the basic data by which we can actually get either the roof done or the sprinklers done or the chiller done in order to actually move in some direction. So that's personal view. As far as the citizens petition, that's fundamentally where we are with the citizens petition, that you've got to do these things if you want to make these things useful, all of the buildings useful, but you also therefore have to have some engineering associated with it. And you do need a set aside if you want anything done in the next year. So that's as simple as it is.
Sorry, Ralph, do you have specific recommendations as to what you'd like to see happen?
Specifically, I would hire if we need to hire a consultant to determine whether or not what parts of a 521 CMR we don't meet, if in fact we exceed the 30% threshold. I would hire that person forthwith and have that person tell us what in fact we don't meet. Because once we in fact invoke 30%, we're going to get in trouble, obviously. But it should not we should not fear it. It is simply knowing what we have to do. And it probably is relatively small numbers of things. Number two, you do need to have somebody, I guess, specify what the roof will be. It sounds ridiculous to me because we're going to hire somebody who's going to have basically people who don't speak English putting shingles on. But that aside, you probably need to have somebody define what you're actually asking them to do, whether it's flashing or types of roof shingles and or any other repair work, for example, that you think might need doing, for example, rotting boards or anything else. So you need somebody to define what you're telling your contractor to do. So you need an engineer to tell you that, and therefore you can bid the document out. As far as the sprinklers go, you do need to have an engineered plan for the sprinklers. There's quite a bit of information on the EBI report as to what that should be, that they are quite specific about, for example, there's 12,000 square feet of area which has to have wet sprinklers. There's another about 7,000 square feet which has to have dry sprinklers, and it's all priced out at about $6 a square foot. So that's 2018 prices. You could then escalate that as you want to put a placeholder in. But basically, it's very easy for someone to specify the sprinklers, but you need somebody to do the specification. So you need someone doing the specification. Is there any other thing that does not have, that we think needs doing, that for which we don't have a specific plan? I think those are all of the things that need to have an engineer or a designer to tell you what you need to have in the way of bid documents. That's kind of it. It's not very much.
Okay.
Could I recommend that we, sorry, I've talked a bunch. I'll let somebody else.
No, I just want to repeat this back to make sure I understand this. So internally, we need Hallen to clarify in writing what is going to satisfy an occupancy permit, right?
Absolutely.
And we need our assessor to reassess the building.
I would say probably on the assessment, I would go outside on that one, but you can do it any way you want. We certainly need a new assessment, and it should, because it really has to be independent. you can say, okay, our assessors can do it, but it's more likely that you would say, what would someone pay for this building? Usually done by an outside party, but I wouldn't be happy.
Usually, let me just throw something out. What you're saying makes perfect sense, Ralph, but interestingly, for application of this law, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts uses for the state's properties replacement value. They don't hire people to value buildings. They literally use replacement value for their application of this law on their buildings. So I'd be
Okay, whatever.
really
whatever
interested to hear from town council as to why why they would not allow, us to do the same thing.
I agree with you. The only reason I say that is that the 521 CMR talks about full and fair market value. So that's so you have to get a right answer on that one. I agree with that.
Which can mean a lot of things.
Yep, that's right.
Including replacement value, and nowhere has anyone been able to find, a clear definition of it. But I was able to find that the state uses replacement value for their buildings.
Okay, sounds great. Okay.
So, which would give us a completely different sort of, set of math to work with in terms of our 30% ceiling.
Yeah, and Mitch, as you're saying, I think we shouldn't fear the 30% ceiling. That's the real issue, because it's really about accessibility. Don't fear it. Just make sure we know what we're talking about, right?
Yeah, when we find out what we're talking about, we may fear it, but let's find out first.
Yeah.
Okay, so we need Howland for occupancy, and we need to get to the bottom of the assessment. And then what you're suggesting is we need to hire consultants to analyze our accessibility requirements, okay, to come into compliance.
Agreed. Yep.
Spec the roof.
Yeah.
Design the roof, whatever you want to call it.
Spec it. I'd say spec it. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Spec the roof.
Design the sprinkler.
Spec this, design the sprinklers. And those were the three things, right?
Yeah, the only other thing you really, and maybe this can be done this year with current 2024 money, but you cannot not do something about the chiller. We can't have our employees not being somewhat cooled in this coming summer. It seems to me obvious we should do the chiller. It's a 20-ton chiller. You can buy them, and they're off-the-shelf products. So maybe that can be done. Maybe Brian could speak to that. But we should do the chiller for sure.
Is Brian Joyce still on the phone, Michelle?
Yeah, I'm here. So that the
quick question, Brian.
Yeah, so the 45,000 line there for the town hall sprinkler alarm system upgrades design also includes, so they're an MEP designer, R.W. Sullivan, that also includes the chiller design. So it's chiller, fire alarm, sprinklers. That's the tech specs, and the drawings does not include the front end, which we would need to add to that.
Okay. Yep.
And Brian, just as a practical matter, is this just a 1-for-1 chiller replacement? And is there anything about sort of, the coolant in that system or something else that prevents us from just doing a 1-for-1 replacement?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's effectively a one-for-one placement. I can't speak to the refrigerant du jour, but it keeps changing. But it's a chiller, and it's not. We did talk about a air source heat pump and incorporating that, but that just adds a layer of complexity and cost to it. So we ruled that out and just said, let's go 1-for-1 chiller, upgraded, and tie it into the existing CERC system as it is.
Okay. So Rob, your proposal fundamentally is that we should put aside a bucket of money for this design work, these 3 items, right?
I agree. Yep.
So accessibility, roof, and sprinklers, chiller.
And alarm. Yep.
Brian, Michelle's got her hand up. I wonder if there's context
Sorry,
here.
Michelle.
Yep. So we received a proposal in the fall from JRA, which included many of these components in a full study, very similar to what Ralph was talking about, which would include the ADA accessibility, sprinklers, roofs, and it would also include a redesign of the annex side of the building, a renovation design of the annex side of the building, which has never been done because everyone has always proposed to tear that building down and rebuild. That study was $79,000. I don't know if you'd like to consider that. But that is a proposal we have. And it's something that came in during the fall months when we were looking at all options.
Okay, so if we wanted to put money aside, we could put aside 15 for the roof plus 79 for JRA, or would they do the roof too?
We could get them to do the roof with that 79.
Okay. You don't
Makes a
think
lot
they'd
of
add
sense.
15 on top of the 79? You think they'd do it in the 79?
I believe it's included in the proposal, but I'd have to relook. I believe that's already included.
Okay,
So we would get an assessment of the ADA deficiencies we have, or the accessibility deficiencies fundamentally then out of that, Michelle.
I'm sorry, Ralph.
We would, out of that study, we would get a specific report about any deficiencies associated with accessibility in 521 CMR. We would, okay. And will they be broken out?
I don't know. We would have to revisit and make sure it's all included in the scope.
Okay,
okay. If you do that, that would be great. So it feels like that's what fits. And if we spent 80 grand there, we'd still have money to actually implement the chiller replacement, right? So we'd have all the design work, and we can implement the chiller replacement for, for under and stay under the 30% cap while we figure out, what the new cap would be based on a new assessed value. Okay.
you would certainly hope so. I do think we need to do that before the summer months. That's the only thing I would argue here. So, yeah.
If we have the money for it.
Yeah, it's a question of, is the money available, right? Yeah.
Well, it would be coming instead of the roof, which blows through the 30%. And it would only be coming if it stayed under the 30% cap, right? 282, 450.
Well, I'm saying we still got a $200,000, 170 gap here. So, sorry, the sheet isn't $125,000 gap here. So we haven't made the cuts yet.
But the only argument I'm making is we cannot not do the chiller. That would just be unfair to the employees, to be honest with you, really. So just unbelievable.
But half the building has like window ACs, and the system itself doesn't work so well anyway. So I'm also thinking, do we want to spend money on a system that isn't fully functional, or do we want to spend a little bit more money and fix the underlying issues with it as part of the other thing? Right, good money before bad.
Well, there is an issue of sending good money before bad, but the idea of actually going and doing something with split systems is a major change. And
yeah, already
the piping exists, and all we're talking about is putting cold water into the pipes that exist already in the annex instead of hot water. That's all it is. That's all the chiller does. It's a really rather minor thing. But if we were to actually do split systems, that would be a really significant, as it is with the senior center, if you're talking 400,000 or 500 or even 600,000 for a split system, that's, you're probably talking 200,000 or 300,000 for the annex. It's a lot of dough. So
yeah, your point's spot on. I was thinking, this is the Elder Center all over again. If we actually go to splits, Ralph, is it really just cold water in the pipes? There's no refrigerant.
That's all.
Okay.
There's no refrigerant. It's just cold water.
Technical naivety on my part, so I'm asking the question. So okay, my part. Okay, that's helpful. So is the suggestion here fundamentally that we want to spend 80, we want to it sounds like the suggestion is we want to put a number against these studies so that we're in a position to actually act. Is that kind of what
Michelle,
Michelle, you've got your hand up.
So I'm sorry. So we have two requests before us right now for town hall. It's the roof and it's the study.
Yep.
It sounds like we have to go back to the select board, find out exactly what their intentions are, what their next steps are. And it sounds like we're not going to fund these tonight. And we need to come back with additional proposals.
I think that's spot on because the
Okay.
roof itself blows through the 30% cap and triggers all the accessibility requirements.
Perfect.
I don't think anyone's ready to vote on that. I don't think
Okay.
anyone's ready to trigger that.
Right, so I'm only stating that because I
Yeah.
know the schools are on and they want to get to theirs. And Michael indicated that he had an 8:30
No,
stop,
I
so
think that's all
in
fair.
fairness of time.
Yep. So Brian, I see you've got your hand up, but so before we leave this, our suggestion is it the consensus of the committee that our suggestion is they put aside money for a study of these 4 items and then potentially earmark for a chiller so that we actually can start dealing with the HVAC issue and figuring out next steps on all the other stuff? Is that where people are as a group?
Can we hear from Brian in case there's something before?
Sure.
No,
Go
I
ahead,
just semantically, the 45,000 was for design bid documents, not a study. So I just want to, there's a difference there. So it's something that you can use physically to do installation for the contractor.
Okay. So we need sprinkler design bid docs. We need roof design bid docs. And then we need these other consulting studies as well. It's a fair point. You're right. What Michelle, this other study would not have included the sprinkler design bid docs, so we'd still need that as well. Okay. All right. Any other thoughts on this? Michael?
I am still very puzzled why the select board has not met with the citizens petition group who have done a lot of this exact same research. The group, including Clark Brewer, has met with Brian Joyce, John Hallen, and Michelle Leary in discussing all of this. I feel there's a lot of good information to be shared and a lot of goodwill to be gained should the select board meet with the proponents of what is now Article 25.
I agree that would be a constructive step.
I think broadly what I'd argue is that we're very close. That is between the petitioners and the select board. We're very close in what we want to do. It's just, we're not far apart at all. It should be possible to come to a common agreement here.
I concur with that, but I also think we can't appropriate anything until we know what this 30% triggers.
Agreed.
Whether it be a select board proposal, whether it be the citizens petition, regardless of what it is. I mean, we need to know what we've done when we cross that line.
I agree completely. Right. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so the suggestion is, bottom line, we need clarity from Hallen with regards to what gets us an occupancy permit. We need to get a new assessment underway. And then we need to put some money against studying the accessibility requirements, designing the roof, designing the sprinklers, designing a chiller replacement. And I found my list of alarms. What am I missing there?
That's sort of combined, I think.
It's
Actually,
combined with the sprinkler. Okay.
yes, combined with a sprinkler, right? Yeah, right.
Okay. And if we can do all that stuff and stay under the 30% cap based on the current assessment, well, then we should probably do all that stuff.
Yeah. I guess
Okay.
my fear of all of it is by not having any set asides at all, we could come to the fall town meeting and be prepared, but find there's no free cash to actually spend the money. So
Right.
it's a year away. And that's the real risk here. So yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
Okay, Michelle, is that clear where the consensus is coming out in terms of what we want to pass on to the select board?
Yes, it's clear.
Okay, I'll work with you to get that message over to them. Okay. All right, let's pull up our list, and it may be a good time to flip over to the school, recognizing we're not going to get through all this tonight. Michelle, do we have anyone from the schools on board?
We do. I'm trying to promote them all.
Okay, I'll be back in about 30 seconds.
And if those from the schools can raise your hand so I know who wants to be promoted, that'd be great.
Good evening, everyone.
Hello?
Hello. Brian Host had to step away. He'll be back. Our chair.
I think Michelle's still promoting my team.
Okay, I'm back. I apologize. Michelle, can you pull the list back up? And hello, Sue. How are you?
I'm good. How are you? Pat?
okay.
Still waiting for Pat.
Okay. Michelle, if you could just pull up the request list in the background so that we make sure we get whatever items are on this. Thank you.
Hello, everyone.
Hello?
Hi, Pat. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good, Brian. Good to see
All
you.
right. So we've been through these items with Sue and Lance in a prior meeting. We certainly welcome you guys here this evening. We had a couple of follow-up items, but a lot of these items have been resolved, I think, already. I guess what I'd suggest, first of all, is that we've got two liaisons, Corey and Michael online, that we're chasing down a couple of open items on the school requests. It probably makes sense just for them to give a quick update on what they found, because I think it moves some of these from yellow to green, and it might save both of you, Dr. Sullivan and Sue, might save you from having to even comment on them. So let's start there. Corey, I know you've done some work on this, and I think maybe Michael too.
Brian, could you define green and yellow for everyone, please?
Green is basically, where we as a committee landed without, further questions outstanding. In other words, we're comfortable with those numbers, and when we vote, we will vote. It's anticipated that those numbers will get voted through. The yellows are where we still had questions, and reds are obviously where we had major issues. So you'll be pleased to see the school doesn't have any bright reds, but we did have a couple of yellows, and I think some of those questions were chased down. I don't know if we lost Corey. Corey, you still on?
Yeah, no, I'm still here. I just don't know to start with questions or start with answers.
Well, I guess the questions, maybe just to short circuit this, we wanted to, I think, be comfortable just with the choice of the projectors and the number of rooms. I think you had a question with regards to the furniture replacement, but I think you had a conversation with Lance. I think those two items were largely resolved, but
yeah, so the question of the projectors was pretty much resolved in the context of our last meeting, because the cost, I had the old cost in the old spreadsheet, which was much higher per unit. That was my main thing, but with the revised cost in the corrected spreadsheet, they kind of came in line. We also discovered last time that the marginal increase in cost this time around was the increased use of screens that were on wheels, which means they can be used in multiple rooms. So, I found that was, while additional cost does make them more useful. So on the interactive displays, I don't have any follow-ups on that. That was pretty much good at the end of last meeting. On the furniture, I do know that this is part of I did talk with Lance, and this is part of an ongoing thing and something we should always try to fit into. Part of that question was, is there something that's really, a failure, a problem? And it sounds like this is just really kind of good maintenance, not so much a critical sort of event. And then the last question that I had was the number of Chromebooks. If I recall, and Pat, I'm glad you're here. So this is, why don't you start from the top rather than me summarizing what I remember? Could you just start from the top on the 100 Chromebooks, what they're designed for, what the hold is, and why you ended up at that number?
Yes, the way I understand is that fifth grade has Chromebooks for the grade level to be used in school. And right now we have 50 for our fourth grade and 50 for our third grade. If you add 100, that will give us basically access for everybody in every grade to have a Chromebook.
And both those classes are 100 kids?
Yeah, they're roughly 100. I don't know. I assume that we have that affords us with what we currently have enough Chromebooks for each grade. That's my understanding. Sue, do you have anything other than that?
Each grade level is approximately anywhere from 98 to 105 per grade level. So there's a little over 300 students. So like Pat said, we have the fifth grade, and the third and the fourth is sharing. The idea is the principal would like each grade level student to have their own Chromebook to work with.
Yeah, working with tech, that was the number that they also felt was appropriate to make sure everybody has the Chromebooks they need.
So this really gets 2 grade levels up to 100% coverage.
That's right.
And refresh my memory, at Deer Hill, these don't go home with the kids, is that correct?
They do not. No, they're all for in-school use.
Okay.
And it's becoming more and more important in terms of, we do have the bring your own device, which starts at in sixth grade.
Yeah.
This is kind of a predecessor to that. And the Chromebooks are what they take the MCAS on, and it's an important tool in their learning.
The MCAS is done with other computers, right? You've got reserved ones for that. It's not each one individually, right?
The MCAS is done on Chromebooks. Yeah. So we do have enough, and that's why this number. Remember, you don't do the whole school at once. You do grade levels. So we're able to move the Chromebooks around right now. This will get us much. This will also help during MCAS testing when we are dedicating Chromes to a certain grade level. The other grade levels will be able to use the Chromes for learning, to tying up all the Chromes for MCAS.
And the only other thing I think unresolved last time, and my apologies if we'd answered, I just forgot. What was the and I don't know if Pat, you were the decision maker on this one, but decision to buy these rather than just do the 3-year lease like we've done with the past. It doesn't seem like a lot of money.
That question was posed to me. I wasn't the decider. Really leaned on Ron for that because of his knowledge of the lease versus the buyout, and it was determined that because of the number, that buying it was more cost effective than leasing it.
Okay.
I really don't have the details on that. I really defer to Ron.
Corey, we lease the overall Chromebook fleet because this, I don't know what the number is. It's like 600 Chromebooks in that fleet. And so rather than taking the hit all in 1 year, we spread it across 3 years. It really wasn't, there really wasn't anything more to it than that. We own them at the end of 3 years. It's a lease to own.
Yeah. I think we got a $1 buyout or something like that at the end of it. I was looking at the lease the other day. Yeah.
So that makes sense. That was the logic behind the lease. Okay, so on these items, I guess I just want to pause for a second. Does anyone on the committee have any further questions for Pat or Sue with regards to? Let's go through them, okay? Because Corey's given us the update, but the screens, 46 screens at 225. Does anyone have any further, Michael?
Hi, yes, I am on Mike. To the school committee and admin folks on the line. Earlier in this meeting, we learned that the town manager needs an extra $200,000, which puts additional pressure on all requests. So my question to you is, if we split the projector replacement over 2 years, would that work for you?
Well, it doesn't fit in our plan of moving through the district to replace much needed. We with the help of capital, obviously attended to our middle school, which is our oldest and most archaic devices, and the high school second. So yeah, I understand what you're asking. I don't think this would be the area to skimp on because of the need. Those are really really are old and not working to facilitate learning. So yeah, I wouldn't think this would be the area to do it over 2 years.
One other follow-up question then. Could we look carefully at how you've allocated mobile screens versus wall mounted to try and save us some 10, 20, 30,000 rather than going not all, I know you've got a proportion of rolling versus wall.
Yeah, we'll look at that again closely. Actually, since that question was posed, we've been looking at it somewhat. I don't know that I have the full results on it. Part of the problem with the high school, and you've seen this, Mr. Dick, in the tour, is the classrooms are not standard sized. They're very, you know, there's some variability in the size, and also, you know, where a projection screen would go doesn't always fit within the, you know, the particular room. And then we do gain something by sharing screens and putting it on mobile carts. We can certainly look at that with an effort to, you know, to try to be economical. I don't know how much would save, but we can relook at that for sure.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, do we have any other questions on the projectors from the committee? Okay, how about the replacement of furniture?
Nope.
No further questions on furniture. How about the Deer Hill Chromebooks?
If you would, let me just make an observation, Pat. I think on this one is that one of the things that a lot of young parents don't want to do with their children is to introduce them to,
oh my God,
spending time on screens at a young age. And although I understand these Chromebooks will remain in the schools and they're using them for MCAS, at least for the 5th grade anyway, you really do wonder sometimes how much we want to actually make kids a slave to those screens, whether those are the first introduction or they become later on, they become cell phones, and later on they become computer games and whatever else. It is a serious question for a lot of young people. I know that they don't want their kids introduced to a lot of these things until they're a lot older. And although I'm not saying we shouldn't do it, I would say I'd be extremely cautious about what we do about introducing young people to what turns out to be somewhat dangerous social media as a result of the use of various kinds of media, particularly screens of one kind or another. Anyway, you can comment on that or not, but it certainly is, I think, a thing I worry about a lot.
Well, I share that worry. I would say, Mr. Dormitzer, that our biggest concern are the unsupervised phones that kids are getting at alarmingly young ages.
Sure.
You know, you'd be surprised how young students are being afforded phones at home, and it's not unique to Cohasset. It's something, you know, that's happening across you know, all communities. It's just something we have to partner with families to help them understand the dangers, and we do that and the guidance of it. The Chromebooks are used really for learning, and they do tie into the Massachusetts standards for learning, and they're very supervised when the kids are on them. And we're very aware that they need to learn in a dynamic way, hands-on learning, book learning. Books are still really important, but we're trying to use these Chromes in concert with our frameworks. That's really all.
Okay, well, thank you very much. That does address the way I feel about it as well. So, right.
And
I agree.
Patrick, can you give us a sensation of, I mean, obviously to Ralph's point, you know, the kids aren't on the Chromebooks all day long.
Yeah.
And, you know, the majority of these things lives, they're going to sit in a rack with a battery that's just decaying. So what's like the delta here when it comes to if we're sharing Chromebooks versus in his classroom versus one-on-one? Is it just that each kid gets one, the amount of time is the same? Is it double the time? Kind of what's the operational difference here?
So
I
there's
asked this also as a parent.
There's a variety of uses for Chromebooks. You know, there are some times when we want kids to use them individually, but there's a good amount of time when we're sharing them, where they might be working on a project, whether they're working on a Google slide or some sort of project that they're doing research on the Chromebook. So there are a lot of times when they are doing some hands-on work sharing. It kind of varies. This gives us the opportunity to do both. And so, you know, I think it goes kind of back and forth on that, you know, the use of the Chromebooks. And this affords really equal opportunity across the grade levels. Does that help? Hello?
Yeah, no, I'm just, I don't have any follow-ups. Thanks, Pat.
Okay, thanks.
Anyone else have any other questions with regards to the Chromebooks?
No.
Okay. Is there any controversy surrounding the Chromebooks in terms of where the committee would fall out on this? Okay. I'd suggest we green it and move on. Unless there's a few voices objecting. We have
Brian,
yes.
there is a question. Danny said he just inquiring as to the warranty on the Chromebooks, and I believe it's 3 years.
It's 3 years. That's my understanding. Sue, do you have any differing understanding?
No, that's correct.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I just a comment. It's not a warranty driven comment, but it's certainly a life cycle comment. If you buy a model of a Chromebook that's towards the end of its production run, it will accelerate the moment when Google stops supporting it. So you don't want to buy the first year of anything, whether it be a car or a new computer, but you know, you also don't want to be at the tail end of the production run before they come out with new models. So just be sensitive to that. So we skipped over the, well, we're just going down the capital stabilization fund items right now. We can move over to the other two, or the other columns in a moment. And then that leaves us with the athletic vans, you know, where this was sort of at the bottom of your priority list as it was presented to us. I don't think we would argue with that, but I certainly want to provide the opportunity to speak on this to the extent you'd like to.
Sue, you want to comment on it? I'll
Sure.
fill in color as
Sure.
needed.
So athletics is having trouble getting transportation to games with our eight buses. We do have two spare. One doesn't leave the town. But what happens frequently, especially in the spring sports, is we don't have a bus available to transport our athletic teams. So when we don't have a bus to transport, he has to outsource to outside vendors, and that becomes very pricey. You know, it's $32 an hour for a bus driver to drive, but it's $590 a day or use for a contractor to transport us. So that's very pricey. You know, to give an example, a few weeks ago, we had a class field trip. So the two spare buses were out on a class field trip, and then Athletic Director Rotundi had a game. He had to lease or borrow, I should say, not lease, a bus from Situate, which, you know, isn't ideal. They charge us for it. If he had his own, out of 40, 45, 46 teams, more than 3/4 of them with one or two vans could be transported at any time. The bigger teams obviously couldn't be, like the football team would still need buses. But as he said, you know, Athletic Director Rotundi said, you know, almost all the other teams could use one or two of the vans and get where they need to go, and we wouldn't have to worry about outside transportation. Because transportation is still a shortage in all the areas. I mean, we're lucky now that we have enough drivers and enough buses, but that's not the same in every district. So when we reach out to get transportation, it's not always available. And he has had to cancel and or reschedule games because we can't find transportation.
Just remember the transportation needs, our high school gets out earlier than our elementaries. So we still need the buses for the elementary routes. And a lot of our teams in our leagues actually start earlier. So they're looking to have contests early, really right after school for us. So it does put a pinch on it. And this gives us, it's really a flexibility issue, and it's an issue of not being mandated to have to get a borrow buses, as Sue said, from Hingham or Situate. That's really why the request is made.
Okay, and this it's flagged that, you know, this might be paid for out of the athletic fund. Is that your thinking, or is this a capital stabilization fund request? What's
the athletic revolving fund cannot support a lease on the two vans.
Okay, and does the athletic fund currently pay for the transportation costs of the athletic teams?
Most of the time, if there's money in the revolving, we use it. If not, we have a line item in our operating budget for transportation.
Okay, so it's not coming out of the transportation revolving fund. It's generally not coming out of the athletic fund. It's generally coming straight out of your operating budget.
It comes out of the operating budget, but a portion of it does come out of the athletic revolving. They just couldn't add, you know, $31,000 to fund to the athletic revolving fund.
But understand they can't add it, but if we're replacing outsourced, my question really is, if we're replacing the outsourced providers, does the freeing up of that money cover the cost of these vans?
Oh, that's a good question.
It is a good question. I would say some of it, yes. Some of it, yes. Like when it's our own drivers, there wouldn't be much of a savings there. But when it's outsourced, you know, for, like I said, just give an example, we had a 5-hour field trip with Charles Transportation, cost us $765 for the 5-hour trip, and to use our own buses was about $160. So there will be some savings, obviously. We try to, you know, utilize our inside transportation as much as possible when we can.
And this will secure a lot of the teams. These two vans will take are smaller teams, which definitely helps quite a bit with the ability to make sure everybody gets transported on time.
Right. Brian, Paul Kearney here. I'm on the school facilities finance committee. I just want to add another point to that. It's just not only used for athletics, but it's also used for some of our teams, like the debate team. And so to your point about the athletics, it is going to be used for other things as well, like you were saying.
Right.
So.
Absolutely correct.
So I have a question with respect to the coaches or the drivers of the vans. Is everybody comfortable driving these vans with students? And what do we have to do to ensure against liability?
Sue?
So, according to our athletic director Rotundi, most, if not all, of the coaches are comfortable driving the vans because they're only 15 passenger. They don't have to get a 7D license because they're not transporting to and from school on a regular school day. Our recommendation would be, people that are driving would get the endorsement just to cover ourselves, so they have it. And the liability would fall, they would fall under a regular umbrella of liability insurance.
Who's insurance?
It would be through the town's insurance.
But, okay, I just want to make sure here, because technically employees are covered under your general insurance policy, but these are coaches and not all of them are employees. Just, it's just important that we know that we're covered.
Well, we treat all of our coaches as employees. I mean, they have to be fingerprinted, they have to be quarried, they get appointed, they're paid through our payroll, so they are treated as a part-time or seasonal employee.
However, that's a great point. I mean, we can bring that up in our committee meetings to make sure that that is taken care of.
Michael and Corey, I'm going to get to you in a second. To Susan's point, I think we just need to make sure that the insurance company views them as employees based on the terms of the terms of the policy. Susan, Susan Franklin, any other questions before I move on to Mike?
No.
Okay, Mike.
Hi. Susan sent over to me several spreadsheets and Word docs that laid out the costs and the frequency that the school had to go outside. It was kind of hard to do a real analysis.
Yeah.
But in general, it looked to me like there seems to be a cost benefit here. It's still not clear to me how long it would take to recoup the investment. But in general, it looks like it certainly is sufficient cost savings to be a benefit. That said, I'd like to ask Susan and Pat, on the use of revolving funds, is there an opportunity to add in an assessment for those travel teams that use our buses to pay something towards their transportation, either by the season or by the year, or is that already being done? Are we already asking them, the participants, the athletes, to contribute to the transportation, or is it completely free and provided by the town?
Well, I think that's probably factored into the fee that we charge, because we do charge a fee for athletics for each sport. We can certainly look at raising the fees, but when we did a comparison of surrounding towns, we're kind of right in the middle of where, or closer to the top end of what other districts charge for sports and seasons.
And other towns do transport via coaches in vans for sure. There's some of the smaller teams, we wouldn't be a standalone in that. But it's always a good idea to look at our fees and to, that's something we've discussed with the subcommittees and school committee in general to determine if they're at the right level to facilitate what we need. So it's a really good point.
Yeah, I really do think that given that we're adding to the town's fleet and we're making a new capital investment, I think it's appropriate to raise the fees. I guess it would depend on how many student athletes you're moving in the course of the year, and find some kind of fee increase that is not onerous, but at least helps the town. I appreciate the fact that other towns might provide it for free, but they have their own budgets. we're trying to work with this budget here.
I hear
And,
that.
we have additional pressures this year.
Yeah, we'll bring that, that very well stated recommendation to our school committee. I know a couple of them are here. It's certainly something that we're looking at, seriously, but it is a school committee decision in terms of.
Understood. Okay,
Yes.
great.
We are planning on doing a fee review in several areas. Athletic revolving would be one, transportation would be another one.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Corey?
Yeah, so it sounds like not all the committee members have the same amount of information, so I'm going to try to fill the holes that I have. How much money have we spent in the last couple of years on this temporary transportation?
When you say
I-
You mean like
you
last 2
mean
years?
on, yeah, on when we aren't able to use our own fleet when our fleet isn't sufficient for transport of sports for sports teams and alike. That's the question, Corey?
Yeah, well, and then of course slicing that down to places where, my goal here is to really figure out how many times the vans would be used and then go from there, because it sounds like there's some of those times, well, most of the time we try to use our own, some of the times we have more kids. I mean, this is only 30 kids minus some coaches, so it's really not a lot of people, never mind if we have 2 teams going somewhere. So what I'm trying to really get at here is, if you actually slice down how these are going to be used, it doesn't make sense to just continue to use them as necessary or find a better way to save that money. Because one of the things we learned with like the senior center vans is we bought equipment with theory about how they would work, but then that theory didn't really work out. So I'm a little bit, my radar's up. So the question really is, well, how much money have we spent on the outside transportation, and how much of that we'd have to do anyway because it's a bus, and then trying to go through there, because if we could find a different way to do this for less money, or at least have the really clear data, then it'd make this a lot easier to kind of figure out what to do with.
Well, before maybe Sue can help with the numbers, but obviously the smaller vans, the vans which are smaller than buses, will take away the prospect of using a large bus for a small team, which does come in handy because you're able to facilitate those buses, those teams, I should say, with the vans, and then that means that we're left with the bigger teams using the buses, which is what it should be. Sue, in terms of the number, do you have a number for Corey?
I did supply a spreadsheet. I don't know if you want me to, I have it up on my screen that will give you a quick idea if you want me to share it.
Yeah, if you just get a sense of what we're spending now.
Okay, that's a good question. I don't have that number. Sue does have the spreadsheet, so.
Make sure I have the right spreadsheet. So you can see here, we went back a year, because when we started this presentation, it was a few months ago. So spring sports, I'm sorry, hadn't begun. But if you can see here, the vendor. So these are all the vendors, and the dates, and how many buses that we needed. So there are times that we need 1, there are times that we need 2, there are times that we need 3. And off to the right, you can see what the cost is going down, what the charges are, what the teams are. And then I had added a column that shows out of all those that were outsourced, where could a van fit in. So I put, this is in red here where it says van. Those are the transports that we could have used, vans, if we had our own. So I don't know if it doesn't give you a bottom number, Corey, but it kind of gives you an idea of what and how often it's happening. And like as Dr. Sullivan said, what happens is a lot of these sports.
Can you keep scanning down so we can see the full page, so you can.
Actually, folks, if I can break in, I actually did a summation using the 2023 use, because there's several years on here. I came up with about $5,000 for the year, where you could have used vans, but instead spent roughly $5,500. So extrapolating that across several years, to me, made sense on a cost benefit.
Yeah,
But this is just back, call it back of the envelope. It would be helpful to maybe sit down with Susan, if there's time, to actually do an actual cost benefit analysis that this committee could rely on. But just as a rough estimate, it looks to me like the savings, at least by contracted services, that's what we're talking about, right? Contracted services
Correct.
was about 5,500 for 2023. And it was only, not only, it was about 20 some odd trips in the, making up that total. If that helps.
Yes, and
Like
I'd like,
5,500 for 2023.
Yes, roughly. And that's
So
doing some,
over, also over 4 years, that's only 20 grand. Or
yes, that's
22
right.
grand.
keep in mind, it's also the flexibility in that these, it's hard to get, sometimes these scenarios made our teams late to contests. It's a real operational pinch for us to have to go out and get borrow a van for, it's, the cost is certainly an issue, and I get the charge of this group, but it's also about the assurance that our kids actually will have transport to be on they're at their games on time. We don't have information here about, how many delays this resulted in, but it's often a source of tension for our athletic teams when they can't make a game on time because it's not certain we're going to be able to have a bus.
right,
But and these buses come with drivers, right? So so is part of the cost savings here the fact that we're driving ourselves,
right.
or are we also hiring drivers for the vans?
No,
No,
we're driving
No,
ourselves.
coaches are
Right.
driving.
Right.
Okay,
That-
and so coaches can drive vans, but they can't drive personal vehicles.
They
Correct.
can't, well, they can't drive kids in personal vehicles. They can drive them in vans, but those vans aren't considered buses, so they don't need the special license for the bus.
Have you explored renting vans with our drivers? Is it possible to, like, I don't know, get a contract with Enterprise or whoever it is to just get as many vans as we need? Because I see sometimes, like, maybe we need 3 vans, but if driving vans is a possibility for our coaches and they're willing to do it, and sounds like a huge potential for savings, then we've just got an equipment problem. Is there a different way to do it? Because, again, even the way we're doing now, it sounds like it's a little bit cheaper, even though it's less efficient. So it sounds like the efficiency is figuring out how we can drive ourselves. That could bring our costs down a lot too.
I don't know that we have. Have you done that too?
I don't, no, we haven't, but I don't know if we reached out to rent vans.
Like, I know, like, the church groups do it all the time, right? There's you can rent these things anywhere, right? So,
Right,
I
but
just wonder
these
if we have
vans-
like a standing contract for like a 15-passenger van or if anything, then we could do that for a year, and then we'd have a really good data point to say, hey, we've used this van this many times, and then we could say, hey, it makes a lot more sense for us to keep 1 on hand, 2 on hand, 3 on hand, because then you'd have a real hard piece of data about, hey, this works with our coaches and all that kind of stuff.
I get what you're saying, Corey, and I understand exactly what you're saying. I guess the supposition is that these vans will be readily available to us, and I don't know that that's accurate. I don't know of any other district using budget rent a van or to do that, so I don't know that that actually is available for us. It would be something we could explore, but I wouldn't want to say that that's necessarily the case.
Right, and I'm not sure there would be a cost savings because the price of the van is probably not going to be that much cheaper than the price that the same transportation companies charge us for a bus.
I mean, I know what you're saying. You see them everywhere, and I would say that's possible, but I just wouldn't want to say that. I wouldn't want to depend on that if indeed, we haven't really looked into that.
Right, and like Dr. Sullivan said, what happens is a lot of the sports events are starting 4 o'clock games, and our students aren't getting out, so that's where we come into a conflict with our buses. Our buses are still transporting elementary school students, and a lot of the sports events at the high school level, secondary level, have already started, and our vans are in use, our buses are in use. Which
Right.
is why we're reaching out to use our spare, or we're borrowing, like you can see here, how many times we borrowed a bus from Hingham.
Also, Corey, to your point, this also gives us an opportunity to have like a freshman basketball team, which we charge over $700 for a family. So there'd be 10 teams on that bus, paying $700. So there is also that cost effectiveness as well, because now we'll have kids doing more activities.
Yeah, that's to the flexibility point that you made, Paul, when you talked about debate team, for instance. It does give us flexibility to use these for other groups.
Right.
So,
I'm gonna mute your.
Francine, were you about to speak? Does anyone else have any questions on the committee? I had one, but I don't want to steal it.
I just had one question, and maybe this has already been answered. It said it was a 48-month lease, so that covers the full 4 years. So you won't come back to the committee next year to ask to pay for the second year of the lease? Is that right? Oh, you're on mute.
I had that question too, Francine, so.
What was the question again? I'm sorry.
I'm sorry if it was already asked, Corey.
No, it wasn't. No, that was.
Oh, okay. My question, sorry, my question was, the price that's there, the $31,000 or so, says it's a 4-year lease. Is that for the full 4 years, or is next year, school committee will come back to us and ask us now to pay for the second year?
That's just for 1 year, the 31,000.
Okay, so that's not the all-in cost. So the all-in cost is something higher than that.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so
That's a different story.
I'll take back my cost effective.
Yeah, okay.
but
So it was.
Yeah. I'm willing to meet though with Susan and actually do something more accurate with more precision than just a quick run through.
That would be great. That would be great.
That's an expensive lease for
But
2 buses. Yeah.
Well, it's it's a little over $1,000 a month per vehicle. It's like, I guess that maps out to about $1,200 per month per vehicle. So I had just one big picture question and then a suggestion just to think about. And I guess my question is, all of these times that we've leased a bus, is that because of our 2 spares were fully deployed somewhere? I mean, I'm surprised that we would have this many occasions where, we had 8 buses running our local route, and then, we had both of our spares preoccupied. So what am I missing?
We only had 1 spare.
Okay.
Because, well, okay, so now you get into the COVID world where we actually did contract out with First Student, and they brought their bus and their driver with us because we couldn't find drivers. So we actually, the only way to get we were combining routes and doubling up routes. If you all remember that, it was quite chaotic. So that it was a little less stressful then. It was also during COVID, and it was a different time for transportation and everything. But outside of that, we've had the 8 buses which were in use. Remember when we went to we had 7 routes, and that was when we had 2 spare at that point. But then when what we realized is that when we went to the 2-tier bus route, because we changed our times and we put our elementary schools together on 1 bus, that it slowed the route significantly. So we had to use our 8th bus to do an 8th route, which really only left 1 spare.
1 spare, yeah.
Right. Now we have the electric bus, which is now in the fleet. But remember, the electric bus would just get absorbed into the fleet because that can't go really out of town. It's used in town. So that's kind of the problem, is we don't have the 2 spare because we have the 8 buses functioning. I realize with the electric bus we have 10 buses, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, but we didn't have 2 spare.
You didn't in the past. So, okay, so first, if you had 2 spares, a lot of this would have gone away. Is that accurate?
The Bluebird is really not, that's a whole different story. The condition, the Bluebird's kind of getting a little bit older, and I'm not sure that that is a reliable option for transport outside of town either. Now, I'm not going to say that it couldn't work. It just, I don't think it's the best option for us. That's a true spare bus.
Okay. So here's where I'm going with the suggestion. Okay. We basically incurred all these outside needs because we pulled one of our 2 spares into the daily grind as an 8th route, which left us with 1 spare.
That's correct.
That forced you into the market fundamentally to purchase capacity as needed, and that's what we're looking at on these spreadsheets. On paper, we're now moving to a situation where we've got 10 buses, including 8 spares. 8 spares. It's getting late. Eight primary and 2 spares. Okay, and the 2 spares, one is a 2014 bus and one is an electric bus. So, 2 comments on that. The first is, let's just accept at face value for a moment that you don't want the 2014 bus leaving town. Fine. I think that's an operational decision. I do want to highlight that bus only spent, a handful of years in frontline service. My guess is it probably has 50,000 miles on it, maybe 60. And it's a 10-year-old bus. And when we did the leases in 2015, we were retiring 20-year-old buses. So I get that it's not a brand spanking new bus, but this is not, almost dead either. So on to my suggestion, I also understand that you probably don't want the electric bus maybe leaving town until you gain some comfort with it. And I get that. That makes perfect sense. But we have 8 buses. We own 8. Well, we lease 8 buses. We have, temporary ownership of 8 buses that are perfectly capable of leaving town. So my suggestion is, why don't we pull this, the 2014 and the electric onto the primary routes on the days that you have buses that need to leave town, and spend one of our, send our new lease fleet buses out of town on these, on these handful of occasions. I think that gets you really a long way towards addressing this capacity requirement. And I, certainly respect that you may not want to put 6 kids on a bus. It may not be fuel efficient, but it's certainly cost efficient. And I'm just looking at the breakdown, half of these trips required 2 vans anyway, which kind of justifies a bus.
Yeah.
That's just me thinking out loud. It's just something I'd ask you to think about. You don't have to respond to it on the spot because I just threw a lot out there. But I think that in terms of sheer bus numbers, you're going to have the capacity to deal with the overwhelming majority of this now. And I think in terms of sending buses out of town, if you want to be comfortable, just send buses from the new lease fleet and use the spare and the electric locally on those days.
I guess a question for Sue. Sue, were our first student buses helping with transport?
Yes,
for
so, when we didn't, let me see, with the delay of the electric bus, when we started the school year, the school committee recommended that we, keep one of the first student buses until the electric bus came. So we have been, leasing, I shouldn't say leasing, it's renting a bus from First Student for $150 a day, until we got the electric bus. So we're really not gaining another bus.
And
for
I
this year.
apologize for that, Brian. It just dawned on me. It's a little complicated swivel here. I just that just dawned on me as you were saying it.
Yeah, we wanted to be sure that we had enough vehicles to get our students to school and at least the majority of our athletics and field trips going. So the first student bus will go back once the electric bus is transferred into the fleet, which is what our plan is that you mentioned. The electric bus is definitely going to stay in town, and we'll take one of the 8 buses to do outside trips.
Out of town. Yep. And
Hey, Brian, before you go on,
Yeah.
I have to drop off. I think we've used up an awful lot of time on discussion that could have been held offline. Is there anything you need me to vote on before I drop off? Is there anything you need me to vote on before I drop off?
No, let me suggest where I think this is going. I think we're gonna have to meet as a committee Monday to vote all this stuff ahead of the other committees. How do people's schedules look Monday? And I'm not suggesting we're gonna end the school conversation, but let's just bear with us for a moment, Pat, Sue, and Paul, while we figure out logistics here. How do people, recognizing the other committees want our votes, and recognizing that just shooting from the hip and having, a vote on a handful of items before Michael drops. Do people want to try to do that based on the stuff that we've already got in green? Or do you want to just re-meet again on Monday and try and vote the slate?
I'm available Monday.
I'd like to vote on something. I mean, I think we should give them something and say these are, if we have some things that are outstanding, because there's still questions, that's great, but it allows other boards to do some work. I mean, I've been on the other side of that seat. We're just waiting for anything to come down. And then you end up with a vote-a-rama at the end where you can't discuss anything because you've got 50 votes in front of you. So, I mean, if there's stuff here that we're ready to go on, I say we take it off our slate, we let somebody else talk about it for a little bit. And then the stuff that needs more time, we can give them more time for.
Okay, Michelle, and again, Pat, Sue, and Paul, bear with us for just a couple of minutes here. If you could pull up the list, and Corey, if you want to make a motion on specific items that are non-controversial, but I guess what I'm wrestling with is I don't understand how you vote these without knowing what you had to knock off the list. So I'll plant that seed. But if there's stuff here that's absolutely going to happen and nowhere near being at risk of being at the bottom of the list, I feel free to make a motion.
I thought that, I kind of thought that was the exercise we were doing with the green, saying these are things that are on, and we kind of were. That was my understanding. So I'm good making a motion. If it dies, it dies. I don't really won't take it personally. So I would move that the capital budget recommends for appropriations, replacement of patron computers at the library, replacement of computers at the library for students and adults. For the police, the electronic parking and RTF enforcement for 71,093. Replacement of the RTF scale for 67,000. Replacement of the F600 dump truck for 175. Replacement of all the Cohasset High School presenting screens for 225.43. Chromebooks, 100 Chromebooks at the elementary school purchase for 35,000, and 35,000 for the replacement furniture at Deer Hill.
Before we get a second on that, I have a problem voting on the projectors, knowing that Dr. Sullivan was going to see if he could reduce the overall spend by adjusting his mix of mobile versus wall-mounted projectors. I think we can continue to keep that yellow.
I don't think that analysis will take a long time. I think I could certainly get you that information, just with another walkthrough. If there's any money we can share, so I can shave off. So, I mean, if this is something you vote on Monday, I could probably get that info to you tomorrow.
Okay. But my only thoughts is, I mean, if that comes in lower, we want to approve it, we can approve it higher and just have that revised down. I can make the motion a maximum of 225.43. That way we don't have to, go through it again. I'm just trying to save us time. I mean, if there's something functional here where we have a problem with it, okay. But if we're just looking to save a couple $1,000s, I think we can reasonably expect Pat to help us out with that.
Yeah,
without having to go through this process again.
I'm not certain how much savings, but I respect the request, and I would certainly give it a shot.
I mean, it could be as much as $10,000 too. So
I agree with Corey's suggestion, though, to approve it. And if it's lower, then it's, to go ahead with the motion. And if it's lower, then that's better and we can revise it.
Francine, is that a second for mine?
Actually, Corey, before you close your motion, let me just ask, I just want to quickly ask Dr. Sullivan and Sue whether or not there's any discussion on the numbers that we've got next to the bus lease, the electric bus lease, and the Chromebook lease. So lines 22, 23, 24, we discussed these at length in the last capital budget meeting. They're marked green right now. To the extent you're not reopening the discussions on those, Corey, you might consider adding them to your motion, but let me just hear from Pat and Sue first.
Two,
I mean, the only question I had would be on the lease for the 8 buses. Last year, the school committee had asked or requested that I put in the full cost of the lease.
Yeah.
Because of the strain on our transportation and having to outsource buses and drivers. And, you know, we've made a lot of changes to transportation. We've added drivers, we've increased their benefits, we've increased their pay. So the revolving account for transportation, again, we are re-looking at fees, obviously, but you know, our fees are
Okay.
$350 to ride the bus, so it's kind of high already. But we haven't looked at that.
So you've answered my question. You want to have a discussion on this, which means we can't vote it tonight. So let's move on. Are you okay with the electric bus lease and the Chromebook lease? The electric bus lease, just to be clear, we put aside 25 for the past year. We're only going to spend a quarter of it. So there's 3/4 of that money still left. And we basically just added 7 to top it up for 25 to cover the next calendar year. Is there a discussion that needs to be had there, or is that good to go?
good to go.
Good.
And Brian, I think we talked about the increase in bus lease. I mean, I think the viewpoint of this committee was we got into it for $90,000 a year. When we come out of it, we can have a discussion about reallocating that. But at this point, you know, we've built it in as going forward as such. So
Corey, you're right. Let's circle back to that. The point is that there's still a discussion that needs to be had, and Michael's trying to drop off, and you're trying to pass a motion. So there's a discussion to be had in line 20, 22. Let's have that after we have this vote, and we'll continue working. But let's green lines 23 and 24, and Corey, you might consider adding those to your motion.
yeah, I will amend the motion to add lines 23 and 24 for Chromebook leases.
And is line 25
And
in
electric
or
bus
out
lease.
of this motion? Is line 25 in or out of the motion?
Right now, it's out of the motion.
Okay.
Well,
No, I
I don't
kept it
know.
in, Brian.
Actually, I'm fine either way.
Yeah, I'm going to keep it in, Mike. I think this is going to come down, and I
All right, so
appreciate
you're
that,
asking me
but
to vote no on an entire list when you know that I've got reservations. So do you want to force that? Why not put
Yeah, I'm
it,
comfortable with it.
separate it out? Take it out of the motion.
Sounds like it's a yellow for now, Corey, so that we can get a 5-0 on all the other stuff, and we'll wait for Dr. Sullivan to come back on line 25.
the motion was seconded by another member of the committee. So, I mean,
Sorry.
you know, we can die it and revote it, but we've got something on the floor.
Excuse me, I came in and said, before we second the motion, I have a problem. So was a
But
motion
then
seconded
Francine
or
motioned
not?
it. It was by Francine.
Francine,
That's
do you
her right.
still second the motion, or are you willing
I second.
to? Okay,
Okay. Well, hold on, we still have to amend the motion to add lines 23, 24, so.
That amendment would have to be seconded.
Um,
I second.
Anyone want to second the amendment? To add lines 23 and 24, the electric bus lease is 7,000 and the Chromebook lease at 51,337.
Second. I
Great.
second the.
It's amended. Okay, we have a motion. It's been seconded, and we are now going to do a roll call vote.
Well, just procedurally, Michael, if you'd like to make a motion to amend it to take that out, you're welcome to. And then if someone else seconds it, then you've got backup. So you're not cut out fully. I mean, this is the process.
all right, so I will move to take out line 25 for replace all projectors at 225, 483 from the motion on the table.
Would anyone else like to second that? Okay, I'm going to do something a little controversial. I'm going to second it, only because I know this is going to get passed at some number shortly. And I do not want to force my colleague, Mr. Dick, to vote no on this entire slate of items, which I think otherwise is going to enjoy unanimous support. So this is about optics, not substance. And this will be green in less than 7 days.
All right, so now we have to vote on Michael's amendment, my amendment, and then we can vote on the whole package as amended.
Okay, so we will have a roll call vote on Michael's amendment. Susan Franklin,
Susan Franklin, I.
Michael Dick,
Michael Dick, aye.
Corey Evans,
Corey Evans, aye.
Francine Lyons,
Francine Lyons, aye.
Brian Host, aye. Okay, and the other amendment was my own amendment. We'll have a roll call vote on that. Susan Franklin,
Susan Franklin, I.
Michael Dick,
Michael Dick, aye.
Corey Evans,
Corey Evans, aye.
Francine Lyons,
Francine Lyons, aye.
Brian Host, aye. Okay, so now we're gonna have a vote on the dual amended motion. Susan Franklin,
Susan Franklin, I.
Mike Dick,
Mike Dick, aye.
Corey Evans,
Corey Evans, aye.
Francine Lyons,
Francine Lyons, aye.
Brian Host, aye. Great, the motion's passed. Thank you, Michael.
Yeah, I'll be dropping off now. Thank you.
Great, and I want to thank Dr. Sullivan and Sue Owens and Paul Kearney for your patience while we just clean that up and get done what we could get done officially before getting back to our conversation. And where were we? Okay, we were talking about the athletic vans, and before we shifted to voting what we could vote, we were talking about the athletic vans. And I had made the suggestion that now with the with the 2 true spares in the fleet count, that perhaps it's going to alleviate quite a bit of this. But then Sue, you made the point that we actually had the first student bus in this mix during that period of time, and we still had this incurrence. So I guess my follow-up question would be, was our 2014 bus sitting on the lot while we were doing this, or was it out somewhere? Did we actually have 8 buses running locally plus the 2 spares fully deployed, or are we not fully utilizing them?
According to the transportation director, they were fully deployed. We've been using that bus. He's just not sure, he's not comfortable taking it out of town, but we've been putting both buses to use we should have 1 spare sitting. Even we have 8 new buses. We have 1 that was just in the shop for a month. So
right.
Even if they're new, it happens. And without, at least 1 or 2 spare, it does leave us short.
Okay. All right. I think where we're coming out on this, and it's late. I think what you're hearing clearly is that we're interested in certainly saving costs where we can. I think there's a sensitivity to the to the operating logistics of this, but I don't get the sense that people are convinced the math makes sense to do this. But we're willing to have further discussions on it. Is that kind of where I'm hearing my colleagues? Anyone else on the committee want to sort of change what I just change the summary, or is that reasonably accurate?
Accurate. I think knowing that we're the cost per year, understanding that we really, I think it boils down to, and Director Sullivan said it many times, which was, it's a scheduling problem of kids getting late to games. I think that there's a more broad conversation about how to solve that problem. Especially with the realities of what we're facing. So, I think that there's potential for this to change quite a bit. And we can find a way to try to solve the problem in a way that we can also fit within what we have to work with.
Then we're happy to do work on this. But I think we hear you. There's an issue that needs to be resolved in an operating challenge. Okay.
Can I just make one comment in that this is more expensive than just having another bus on our lease, and that's where I keep coming out.
That's interesting. I hadn't really thought about that.
But it's also more expensive than, you know, renting buses with drivers, right? So, you know,
So you're saying instead of two vans, you'd just lease one more bus and pay a driver for those occasions when you needed to use it.
potentially.
Presumes the availability of a driver, but mathematically correct. Okay, I hadn't really thought about that, Susan. It's a really good point.
Well, and I think it washes out. There'll be some places where, you know, we're using both vans, where we could use the bus, and some places where we're overusing a bus, to your point about wasting gas. But
Yeah,
it probably, you know, that gets really in the weeds, but
right.
it goes both directions.
I mean, that may be the answer here. Because then it gives you more backup capacity on your primary bus fleet as well. Okay, so that's another way to skin the cat. Apologies to the ASPCA, but
Terrible.
Susan,
Way to feed the dog.
there you go. All
that's
right.
a thought, I think that's a very thoughtful suggestion.
We'll figure something out here, but it sounds like we've got more work to do on this one at this time.
Yes.
And we're happy to dig in and work on it. Okay. So Michelle, if you could just scroll over to the left, let me just see what other school items there are, at least with regards to the capital stabilization fund column. That's it.
Correct.
In terms of the request list on that's on column C, the capital stabilization fund.
Yeah, not the school stabilizations, correct.
Right. Okay. But I know Sue and Pat wanted to talk, or at least Sue wanted to talk about line 22, the bus leases, and Corey, I cut you off to handle that vote. So maybe we pick up that discussion where it was going. Line 22, the bus lease at 90 grand.
Do you have questions on that?
My question was, the leases, I think our original request was for 150 something, which was the total cost of the lease, not shared with the operating budget.
Right.
With the, additional costs of all the transportation expenses and the elephant in the room, renting a parking lot somewhere. There isn't much funding left to absorb the difference of the leases in the operating budget.
Welcome to the club.
We're feeling the exact same pressures. I mean, we covered this at length, and I felt comprehensively on the last go round. I'm not really sure what else to revisit here, but I think we can go back over it in its entirety, but this was put in place fundamentally as a partnership, given that it includes what historically had been a massive maintenance cost to the school, which is now, bundled with the capital cost of the bus, all inclusive in this lease cost, which is really the only reason we lease, right? This is not an efficient way to get access to a bus. It's an extremely efficient way to cover both the bus and the maintenance. And that's why the number was split from the outset. And the other thing that came up in that conversation was that, a week ago, or 2 weeks ago, is that, with the arrival of the electric bus, the first student rental cost, which I think you had tagged at about 50 grand, is going to go away. So it should free up quite a bit of financial flexibility in that fund relative to, perhaps the pressure that you felt, last year. Because, you'll no longer be paying that cost of first student as a result of us, funding the electric bus. So I'm hopeful that you feel some budgetary relief as a result of that, but I'm not really sure what else to add. I don't know if there's a question or a specific issue that we've missed, but I think we've discussed this sort of at length, and I'm not really prepared to to change what had been a very logical cost split.
Yeah, I don't have anything more to add other than, for us, the cost of the lease, it's been pretty steady at $90,000 through capital. I mean, but the lease obviously every year goes up and up and up. So even if you consider raising it, somewhat higher than the 90,000 would help offset the increased cost of the leases.
The lease cost should be fixed, or they shouldn't be going up every year.
Well, this past year, we have a whole fleet of new buses. So that lease is definitely more money than the lease previous.
Yeah, I think what you're going to find is that the move to the away from the flat nose buses to the slope nose buses actually brought the lease cost down. But if I'm wrong about that, we can have that conversation.
Yeah,
we're not talking about operations, right?
Yeah, I don't think
We're not
at
talking about
least
operations.
amount didn't go down.
Okay. Can you get me the lease cost from the prior lease to the current lease for the total
Absolutely.
fleet?
Sure.
That would be helpful. Okay.
Can I do a time check here?
Sure. It's late.
9
Very
o'clock.
late.
Yeah, I'm fading fast here, so.
Yeah, so let me make the following suggestion, because we do need to wrap up. Is there, I don't think there's a discussion that needs to be had. So that's it on the buses, and that's it for that column. I don't think, we need to revisit line 2. I don't think we need to revisit line 27. Is there any reason we need to revisit line 37, which was this, $250,000 category, I guess, is what I would say. That is not on the warrant at this point in time, and therefore not really actionable for our.
Yeah, if I could speak to that, we voted 3-2. It's going to be on the warrant. So I know somebody has told you differently, but 3-2 vote. So we are going to, it will be on the warrant. And that's for safety related items. I don't think anybody on your committee wants to be not on record to vote against safety items. So we would like to have you on record if you're going to vote on it, because we did pass it 3-2. So I don't know, the two chair people didn't understand that it's going to be on the warrant. So we do want to have you on record if you're not going to support these items.
Oh, I'm happy to be on record.
These are safety related items.
And we did, the first pass, if I can add, we met as a budget subcommittee and came up with this line item. We have since asked the, correct me if I'm wrong, School Facilities Committee, which I believe is Jason Earls. He and Paul Kearney from school committee did a lot of work putting together what that 250 would look like. So I would hate to have wasted their time putting that together. If we could take a quick look at what the items are.
Only about 5 slides. You can go.
Yeah, and if you want to table that, I don't have a problem with doing it on Monday, because it is pretty intense. I mean, we're talking about some safety related items. We might have a child get hurt on the crosswalks if these aren't being addressed. As a parent with kids in that school, I'm very concerned about it. So we voted 3-2. We're very strong, and we've done walkthroughs. There's a legal liability if somebody trips and falls over these cement sidewalks that are dangerous. And there's a whole host of things. So I would appreciate if we could maybe table this, because I know everybody's tired, and I appreciate everybody's hard work on this. It's just that we've worked hard on this too. So we wouldn't just want two chairs to get together and just dismiss what we've done for work. So we'd like to be heard on this, please.
And Ted Carr is also here from school committee. So he could speak to it too if you needed another member of school committee.
Okay. So, you've heard from a member of our committee that we're kind of at the end of our fumes. I've heard from a member of your committee that, you know, that you'd like to table it and pick it up on Monday. I think that's the right suggestion. But I want to give you some guidance so that you come into that conversation thinking about this in a way that is going to be well received by capital. And I'll try to do this as gracefully as I can, and it may not come out that way, for which I apologize. Okay. The capital budget committee does not approve line items. It approves specific capital requests one by one. Okay. So the concept of a bundle of stuff with a big number next to it does not fly as a starting point. Okay, it's got to be individual requests unless they're very, very similar, so similar that, you know, they would be called the same thing. That's number one. Number two, they've got to be capital requests. The slide presentation that we received, I don't know what it was, maybe a month ago on the first look, had pictures of all kinds of things that are not capital requests. They're just basic maintenance of your building and and what's inside of it. You know, there were pictures of broken chairs in the auditorium. That is not a capital request. That's a request that you need to make to Nick and his team. You make the request, he's on the hook to come fix it. Okay. So we don't want to see those items, and we're not going to fund a blank check, you know, pool of 250 grand if that's what you're thinking you're going to go spend it on. So that's point number two. It's not capital. It can't be funded out of capital. It can't be funded out of a facilities capital fund or out of the capital stabilization fund. Point number three is that, you know, your funding source here, your proposed funding source here is the school facilities stabilization fund. Okay. And that was passed by a warrant article, and, you know, that's what people voted on, and people were given, you know, rock solid, I think, I don't want to say guarantees, but assurances that to get money out of that fund, you were going to have to bring specific capital requests, and that they were going to follow the regular way capital approval process. What you've got in front of us right now is not that. Okay. So regardless of our feelings, this does not even follow the spirit of how that funding source was put in place. The final point I'd make is it's almost certainly a violation of our bylaws. It just doesn't look anything like a capital request. So I'm sure in here is an intent to spend money on some very valid capital items, but those capital items have not been put in front of us. And, you know, you're talking about this. You're talking about going to a detailed conversation literally in the days that the warrant has to go to print. Like, this is just not, it's just not the time in the cycle. So I'm happy to have this conversation on Monday, but I'm just speaking out loud in terms of, you know, where you guys are relative to what would actually comprise a capital request.
I got two things, Brian. Just one. I mean, we can't post for Monday. Not enough time, so we'd have to meet Wednesday because 48 hours. And
today's Wednesday. We could post tomorrow for Monday.
Try again.
Today's Thursday.
Oh, good God.
You had seven options.
It's literally been that kind of week, and so the joke's on
It's about to be Friday, actually.
Hey, I'm glad everyone can see me laughing at myself, because I know that that's probably a foreign concept, but I do it often.
But I did just want to read, and so again, this is to the process here. A lot of this, and I think Brian brought it up, there's stuff we can and cannot do, and so in the policies for these funds, there's very specific language of how we hear them, including that they're included, and the select board reviews them and votes on them as part of the 5-year plan, and it needs to come through school facilities and select board to us. So we don't we don't have, at this point, we can't even, as Brian said earlier, we're forbidden from even doing anything with these because the policy is really, really clear about how this is supposed to work. So regardless of my own personal feelings here, in my seat on this committee, I don't have there's nothing I can do, just because that's how the process is set up. I can send the policies over to you guys if you want to read through them, but that's what was voted on by town meeting. That's what got passed. So, here we are.
I actually think I'm flying Tuesday night. I'm just thinking about how we meet next. It's probably going to be next Wednesday.
Yeah, it'd have to be. So I think if select board is going to hear more stuff on town hall on Tuesday, that may help us out because Michelle alluded to that. So,
okay. And Paul, I just want to be clear. I'm happy to hear you guys out on this, but I just don't want you to come into that conversation unprepared in terms of sort of the realities of the framework that we're dealing with.
Right.
Okay.
We'll be prepared.
The other thing I'd throw out is there are other mechanisms to deal with this, including special town meeting. If in fact something truly rises to the level of a safety risk that cannot wait for the next annual town meeting.
Yeah, or if there's not money, there could be a special capital appropriation. I mean, there's definitely ways to address really high priority stuff. Yeah, or reappropriating other funds that are sitting around. So,
Right. Well,
just thinking out loud. I don't want to jump our conversation next week, but we're trying to be both honest and constructive about this.
Yeah, there's very little flexibility in the stabilization fund for stuff.
Right,
Okay.
and it also gives us the time, it does gives us some time to kind of revamp and try to see like what we can do to get these things done. We did vote on it. We're probably gonna have to go back and figure out that and be more precise of what we're asking for. But and also too is like as much as we want to get these things fixed, and I'm sure you guys want to help us do that. I would ask that how, maybe we can, like, how do we do this, right? I mean, when you say that we should have a budget and it should be in the operating budget, that is on the town side as well. So maybe we can have the conversation on how we get that budget done. And because I'm sure everybody here wants to have a safe school.
So just to be clear, items that are not capital go in the operating budget, and items that go in the operating budget do not go in the capital budget. So the smaller items are just maintenance, and they should be in the operating budget somewhere. And there is a large line item for maintenance, at the town level, and it includes the work that Nick does at the schools. But he needs to. I mean, you're the client. You have to let him know what you want fixed. He doesn't walk around, finding every single thing.
No,
And then the capital stuff, we're happy to review it. Bring it,
I think there's some growth to be made in terms of how the schools get consistent repair done.
Yeah.
And I obviously I think that's something that the district should work with the town on.
Right.
Moving forward, I think our school facilities committee can play a role in that perhaps. I think that's a really smart idea. I just think that in the spirit of making sure that capital hears what the school committee has determined is important, that despite your very well thought and well received words, Brian, that I do think it's important for us to share that with you, because that was our charge.
Let's do this. Let's figure out a way to get the stuff done that is appropriate for capital. It may not be this cycle, but we hear you.
Do you disagree, Ted or Paul?
No, sorry, Ted.
Nope, I don't disagree.
Okay, and I really respect what you're saying. I just think that's something that's important for us to do.
Okay, we're happy to hear you. Okay, and I think with that, we've probably. I don't think there's anything else on the list with schools. So given the hour, I would enter, unless there's anything else someone needs to.
I just want to
discuss.
say just a quick word on that, the line item about the projectors. I'm going to try. What I'm going to do is go back and look at that list. I'm not guaranteeing that I can trim any fat. I'm just doing it in the spirit of trying to be constructive. I'm hopeful I can, but I just wanted to, I haven't looked at it in a while, so I'm just.
I hear you, I understand you, and I appreciate it, and I just want to be completely clear. The reason I second the motion to amend is because I did not want a negative vote if it can be avoided. And I certainly didn't want a negative vote effective all of the other items that would have otherwise gone through unanimously. So that was the only reason that happened, Dr.
I get it.
Sullivan.
I get it.
Okay. So hopefully we land, with unanimous across the board as a result of that maneuver.
Brian, can we move the engineering study and the finished retiling items? Get that 450 off our plate and
Yeah,
into a bucket.
let's do that. Is Ralph still on?
Francine, Susan, you okay with that?
We've lost Ralph, so we're gonna be down one, but as long as Susan and Francine are fine with it, I'm okay if you want to move it.
Okay.
All right, then I make a motion that capital budget move to recommend $150,000 for the Cohasset Middle High School fire alarm repair engineering study, and $300,000 for retiling all classrooms at Deer Hill to be spent out of the school stabilization fund. Sorry, ended on the wrong note.
We have a second?
Second.
Second.
Okay. I think Susan beat you to the punch, Francine.
I don't have a cold.
Just for the notes. Okay, roll call vote. Susan Franklin,
Susan Franklin, I.
Francine Lyons,
Francine Lyons, aye.
Corey Evans,
Corey Evans, aye.
Brian Host, aye. So you've got that 4-0. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your patience. And the committee wants to meet next Wednesday. Is that the consensus?
Sure.
Okay. And Paul and Dr. Sullivan, that works for you guys to come back and talk about this bucket of items?
It is off school committee cycle, so that would work.
Okay, perfect. All right, next Wednesday it will be a 6 o'clock meeting, and we'll get you on the agenda.
Thank you very much. Much
Thank
appreciated.
you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
everyone.
everybody.
Have a good night.
Thank you. Good
You
night.
as well. Have a great
Right.
night. And we are going to entertain a motion to adjourn.
Nothing
Second.
else we need to do tonight? Okay. A motion. Give Francine
right.
a second.
Who's the second?
Oh, sorry. I'm anxious.
Francine seconded before the motion was made. You want a second
I
again,
know.
Francine? All right. Francine seconded. Roll call vote. Corey Evans,
Corey Evans, aye.
Susan Franklin,
Susan Franklin, I.
Francine Lyons,
Francine Lyons, aye.
Brian Host, aye. We are adjourned. Thank you
Good night.
for your
Good night.
patience and tenacity.
See you.